Okay. Oops, 1 second. What's wrong with my sound? Can't hear. Check. 1 second.
How about now? Hey! All right. A little bit of technical difficulty today, but we made it work, didn't we, Etienne?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you beautifully, my friend.
Yes. All right. I'm having trouble with my Logitech camera. I'm back to my FaceTime camera. For some reason, when I downloaded everything back to my computer, yeah, still some technical issues, but good morning.
Good morning. Let me make sure I sent off the link to the Hash Church aficionados in the other room. I did, but it's only really been seen by you so far.
Yeah, I got it. No problem. No issue.
Excellent. Well, nice to have you back, my friend. We missed you last week.
Yeah, I had a computer crash. I had a corrupt file vault, and yeah, my computer completely locked up. Every time I turn it on, it would just go black.
Jesus.
Yeah, so I had to wipe it, and then my reinstall was corrupted. So I had to literally go everything all over again. So it was, a total fun time suck, as you know.
Yeah.
No one here watching has ever had any problems with computers, right? They're perfect. They're awesome. How was your week, sir?
Oh, very busy, very busy. I'm just still trying to make sure that all these invitations get out to the right people, because I know, we had, I talked to Brian from Vital Garden Supplies. He said he was going to make it in today, so I want to make sure he's got the link. I also talked to Wade Laughter there from, yeah, so also hoping that he's going to be making it in. And I also talked to Peter from Soil Balance Pro. And he also said he was going to be making it in. So between those three guys right there, we could have a nice little conversation about bacteria and soil and greenhouses and such.
Right on. Shout out to our people down in Chalice right now, bearing the heat.
Oh my God, dude. It was, what is that, 100?
I thought 109, 110. Yeah.
Oh,
but much love to everybody pulling it off. And yeah, it was interesting to see with their, they did the testing and everything, and they had quite a few fails. They didn't really post them. They just said they had fails.
I saw a little bit of fails.
Oh man, I was surprised that still so many high numbers of failures in these competitions, which, it's part of the reality of people not realizing what and where they're getting their product from, that they're making their hash, or people just outright lying, which is either way is still.
Seems pretty crazy to know you're going to get your material tested and just be like, I'll just spray a little Avid. They're not going to figure it out. Hey, welcome Wade and welcome Brian.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, good to see you both. You guys both came in almost instantaneously. Love the big smiling face, Wade. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Feeling very good this morning.
That's
Lots of exciting things going on.
That's awesome. Well, House of Harlequin representing, and Brian representing Vital Garden Supplies. Dude, thanks for showing up, man.
No problem. Appreciate you having me. Really an honor, for sure.
You want to know how your invitation came out? I think it's one of the coolest stories. I've been doing these giveaways on my channel. I do a wake and bake every morning that's not Hash Church, just kind of wake and bake and shoot the shit with the audience. And sometimes we get pretty deep and we cover some pretty awesome things. you know, people start sending me stuff all the time, and I don't need this stuff. It's too much stuff for me. So I've decided I'm passing it all, like all of it. I'm just going to pass all of it out and send it to the people who appreciate it, type of thing. And so I've been doing these giveaways, and then I started doing contests. And of course, people were like, oh, I answered that before he did. Look, here's a screenshot from my screen. I won the contest, not him. And I was just like, holy Christ. And so I turned the contest into a not contest. I turned it into random giveaways. Like people would say to me, hey, did I miss the giveaway? And I'd say, no, actually, you won the giveaway today. Send me your address at bubbleman@icloud.com. And so I did that the other day to this kid named Eric. And lo and behold, he's a good friend of Brian's. And he sends me an email and he says, dude, you're such a great guy. Thanks for hooking me up. It was such a neat way to win something. And, you know, if you ever want to have Brian on from Vital Garden Supply, I'm like, of course, I've been talking about that with Tony. I just don't have the connection. And he's like, well, let me connect you right now. And that's how Brian came to be on the show today. So,
well, that makes me even feel better. Eric's a good old friend for sure, and that he feels that highly of me to recommend it is,
dude,
he's even more of an honor for sure.
He sent a great email. Like, I mean, literally, he was like, it was one sentence. Thank you for, you know, whatever I gave him, a bottle of DC glass cleaner or something. One sentence like that, and then like 10 paragraphs of how awesome Brian from Vital Garden Supply is. And I'm like, well, those are the people we want on Hash Church for sure.
Nice. Well, like I said, it's an honor, and I'm stoked to be on. And actually, I see Etienne's on, and I don't know if you remember, but way back in the day, Etienne used to hang out at my nightclub called Nyabingi Dance Hall.
Yes, I did, because I used to have the club next door called it was the Machine Shop.
Yep.
Whoa, you have changed a lot. You got a hat on. That's why I don't recognize you.
Yeah.
Yo, hippie. So that goes back to Morgantown, West Virginia, back in the early 90s, folks.
West Virginia.
Yeah.
They brought culture. There was a place called the Underground Railroad, which was basically, if you ever look on the old Black Flag album, Who's Got the 10.5, at 10.5 inches is Morgantown, West Virginia, because Marcia, who used to run the old Underground Railroad, used to hook all the artists up when they would come through, because she paid them. You know, back in the late 80s, early 90s, nobody was paying for shit, but she paid. And so a lot of people came. And unfortunately, she disappeared due to whatever actually happened, a bad coke deal. We don't really know, but she's never been found. But
that's right.
The Underground Railroad sat quite dormant for a while. And then you guys came in and picked up the reins and really restarted the fire there in Morgantown. So thanks for kicking in the culture. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And I think James is still carrying on the tradition as 123 Pleasant Street.
Yeah, the tradition continues, and they end up buying up the Machine Shop and made that now part of the 123. So now it's a rather large venue. It was pretty large as it was before when you guys had it, but man,
for sure.
Good to see you still doing good shit, guys. Same
good to
here.
See. Yeah. Congratulations. I've definitely been like seeing all the success that you've had and all the cool things that you're doing, and
just I've kind of.
Worlds collide.
Yeah, I know, right? And here we are now in California, and you're providing the good information, because as we know, good grow information was hard to find, especially back in the day. I told people I used to have to go to, when I first started growing back in the late 80s there in West Virginia, I had to go to Ohio to actually buy my grow equipment out of fear, because
Columbus.
I had to go to Columbus, and we even parked like 2 or 3 blocks away out of fear. That's how
absolutely
heavy the green merchant fear was back then. And then we would I remember my friend Nathan and I, we had to hide and look around as we were trying not to. We had to look all paranoid walking out of there with just a little 400 water that we ended up putting in a closet and growing through the closet. But it was the heavy fear back then, and you couldn't ask anybody for information. The best you could come up with was tomatoes, right? And even since then, depending on who you talk to, they'd look at you funny about your tomatoes. So how big are your tomatoes, and where are they in season? And, oh man, they just the most brutal questions, Everybody remember this, right?
Oh man, do we ever? I didn't grow up in West Virginia, but Winnipeg, Manitoba was definitely in the Bible Belt. It was definitely harsh. And if you can imagine, when I was 17 years old, I went to the local hydroponic store and I met my mentor, Ron Hickey. And this guy, he's talking to a 17-year-old, first of all. Imagine this. And he takes me down to his basement and he says, look, you and I both know we're not talking about tomatoes. So why don't we just talk about what we're talking about? We're talking about weed. We're talking about ganja. And he just was basically like, from that every single day forward that I knew him, he paid the price with 11 years of his freedom, and he never stopped giving away all the information in the way that it should be given away. He even put 2,000-watt light bulbs in the front window of his hydroponic store that he opened after he got out the first time, showing everyone how to grow weed. And the cops actually made him turn those lights off because they were so bright out on the main front street that it was causing problems with traffic. So shout out to all the mentors, all the giants that we've been able to stand on the shoulders of. I mean, for sure, it's been a bonus.
And all those low-key people in those hydroponic stores that knew what we were talking about but didn't say shit but gave us the information we needed. Thank you.
No doubt,
Yeah.
no doubt. Much thanks, much thanks. First crop I ever grew back there in Morgantown, West Virginia was 1988. And just been learning and trying to gain knowledge ever since. And
You know,
keep it clean and organic.
Ross Johnny was the first person to turn me on to Kind Bud in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And I never forgot that. I'll never forget it, because it was one of those things where back then, you got to understand, I was really ignorant about cannabis people. So I was slinging mechs, and I had a little bit of mechs, and we were in the back of my club, and I was like, you want to smoke a bowl? And he's like, hell yeah. And I pull out a pipe, and he's like, no. Pulls out this little green thing, and I'm like, what is that? He's like, oh, this is weed. I'm like, no, that ain't weed. I'm going to need more than that to get high. And, just all embarrassed and, and green as hell. And, man, I hit that weed, and it changed my life forever. And then I was like, Johnny. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't get you any weed, but, this shit's good. You should try growing it. It's a weed, It's like, oh. So mega thanks. I wouldn't know weed without what you guys are doing.
No problem, man.
So I was thinking of maybe asking Brian to kind of introduce himself to the Hash Church group here. Let everyone know what Vital Garden Supplies is up to and what they're doing, and sort of the groups that you guys are working for. Because I know who you are and I know what you're up to, but maybe some of the audience doesn't.
Yeah, Vital Garden Supplies, a purveyor of high quality organic farm and garden products. We cater to the cannabis industry especially. I think we're going on our 11th or 12th season now. Every year we try to gain more and more high-end products under our own label. We search high and far throughout the world to get the best that we can to bring it to people so they could have clean, successful gardens without the nasty stuff that a lot of people are pushing at those same hydro stores that we started going to way back in the day. They some of them have evolved and learned how to teach people about the organic side of things, and some haven't. So I've taken it upon myself to make sure that our products are as accessible as possible for people, for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. It seems to be always the smaller group choosing the more righteous, higher integrity process, like to not grow with chemicals. It just seems like less people grow organically than not. Would you kind of agree with that, or do you see a lot of people picking up the organics?
I do see a shift for sure. Like,
nice.
I'm really excited about that. That is one good thing about one of many good things about all of this legalization and things coming above board. There is going to be some, testing and some, regimens that people are going to have to get rid of that they used to use to get rid of things such as powdery mildew and mites and things like that, where now they're going to have to use organic solutions so that their product is sellable and considered medicine, and even actually now that we're going to have rec, even like smokable material. So like there's been a lot of hiding behind closed doors all these years. So it's going to be nice to see everybody, really have to like show the proof and the paperwork behind what they produce.
Where are you located, Brian?
We're in Nevada City, California. We also have a distribution center. Shout out. And where are you?
I'm in Nevada City.
Oh, no way.
I've been into your store, Brian, and yes, one of the complaints I have about a lot of grocery stores, when I go into them, the salespeople seem most interested in selling products as versus informing and helping the person that's standing in front of them. And my experience in your store has been that your employees actually try to educate me on the various products that you've got and what implications that they'll have in the final products that I make.
Well, that's really good to hear.
Yeah, no, you're a sterling example of how, in my opinion, a cultivation provider should be in terms of, like I said, you're not really pushing product so much as trying to help educate people. And that's a really thing I think is a huge need in the cannabis industry.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we definitely, obviously, our business is to sell products, but we also really do appreciate those farmers who take things upon themselves and make their own compost, and they're self-sufficient, and they're building their own, microorganisms in their flora and their soil.
Yes.
But on the other hand, we have products if they need aid in that. And, as our industry is growing, there's going to be many different paths that people choose. And the way I see it is, the people who are trying to go larger scale and want to stay organic, they're going to have to source products. And I want to make sure that we're there for them so they can actually source things that are safe and that are going to actually have success, so they don't get scared that, oh no, this organic thing isn't working, we're going to have to go back to the synthetic style. And I think that's one thing Vital's been really good about, and my employees especially are all super passionate about growing cannabis, and they all love it so much. And they've taken on this thing that we've inside, we call it Vital Pride. And I didn't even realize it until several years into it that some people really take it upon themselves to really appreciate what it is that we've done, and then take that knowledge and take that specialization and put it into their garden and put their little twist on it, and it makes it so that they're able to have the utmost success.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're raising everybody up. That's the key thing. When you're passing out knowledge, it's one of the things early on when I was the buyer there at BPG, I realized that I could just send somebody away with their cannabis, or I could actually, you can tell, you can look at a plant now, or after you've looked at, tons of it, as a lot of us have, you can look at a bud and tell exactly what's going on, what the nutrient issues are. And so I would actually, tell that to them, and then mine would blow. But I always would say, okay, well, here's the problem. And they'd be like, oh my God, were you in my garden? I'm like, no, the bud is the truth teller. No matter what you tell me, you're lying to me. The plant is telling me the truth. So as I look at the truth here, you've got heat issues, it's picked too early, and et cetera, and go through the standards. And I would say, you fail this time. But next time, come back to me and let's see if you've applied these things, and what you could have gotten this for, you can get this for if it's at this quality. And I had to take a bud out of something that I have and show them and say, this is of this quality and this is what I expect. And if you can deliver that, then I can give you this price. And then people would go home with that knowledge and apply it. As you know, Brian, people really are searching or are thirsty for information, because a lot of the earlier grow books were so full of not misinformation. It's just, they're so technically confusing to a lot of people that people just wanted simple information. What does my pH need to be? What is my, what's the best nutrients I need to grow, et cetera. And so it's been a wonderful shift with, prohibition collapsing from, 215 to where you could start to talk about it. Now with legalization, you don't have the fear anymore. You actually have suppliers aren't worried that you're selling to cannabis people anymore. So the whole paradigm is shift for you. Whereas back when, back in the day with green merch and everything else, you had to act like an undercover agent just going into a hydroponics store just to buy your stuff, much less ask for information or get real information or information you could actually use. So thank you, Brian, for taking it and raising the standards and, raising everybody up together, because that's why I still have suppliers at BPG, is because, 17, 18 years ago, we decided, we need to educate these farmers so that they can make better cannabis, because we're reliant on our patient cultivars. We'll give you the clone, but it's what you do with that clone. And we know people can ruin a clone and ruin every aspect of growing a plant. But by putting good genetics out there, we knew that good genetics would come back if people would get the grow information. And now with that, it's spawned into good information. So now everybody is benefiting from it. You know, the local, regional, you know, people are making more money, which means they can now spend more stuff at the hydroponic store or the grow store so that they can actually, you know, make bigger and better crops for themselves the next time. So that sustainability, and they learn from that each time, and that we only help everybody get better. So thank you for taking that philosophy, because back 20 years ago, you know, we all were thirsting and craving for that.
No doubt. And that is something that we like take upon ourselves to like be the first most important thing. Knowledge is power, for sure. We always sponsor different classes and special people like Elaine Ingham to like educate our clientele of how the right thing to go about, you know, using beneficial microbes, organic fertilizer, and not feeling this thing that you got to use a synthetic, or like scared to like get away from their 3-part nutrients. So yeah, education is everything. And once people get comfortable with what they're doing, it makes them enjoy what they're doing even better and feel a little bit more, you know, confident in all aspects of gardening and farming and growing cannabis and taking it to the next level.
That's it. You know, it's 20 years ago plus it was vegetative growth. Let's see how much we can grow. Let's see how fast we can get it. And slowly but surely, thank Ja, that's changed by people becoming more focused on the actual medicinal components that are growing on these plants, these small little glandular trichomes, whether capitate stalked or sessile stalked or bulbous. All three of them contain the profiles that we seek and desire. And as we learn that, we start growing a little bit differently, focused maybe more on the actual medicinal components of the plant, at least as much as the vegetative growth and the vegetative plant matter that we're going to be yielding. I gave up on vegetative yields maybe 10 or 15 years ago now. So, hey, I'd like to welcome Indra to the room, and I'd like to welcome Dr. Mark Chaldone to the room, and we've got Peter back from Soil Balance Pro. I thought he would make a wonderful addition to the conversation, along with Wade and along with Brian. I'm not sure if you guys are all familiar with one another, but you're all kind of doing really wonderful shit in different ways and places, and you're all little pieces of the puzzle that I just see as making a wonderful panel here today. So welcome all of you to the room.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm going to go back to you for a second. What are the most common problems that people are coming into you that are vexed, that are looking for solutions that you're able to find, or that are new solutions that you found to assist people?
Good question there, Etienne. Back to what you were saying a little bit earlier too. Like a year and a half ago, give or take, I approached the Marone company. They make a couple organic bio pesticides and not pesticides and fungicides, and they're all certified organic and made from microbes. And I had been using them for quite some time, but unable to really obtain them for distribution. And they were definitely scared of the cannabis industry, and it took quite some arm twisting to get them to, you know, consider it. And you know, I really thank them for finally coming around, and some of these products are definitely helping by great proportions on powdery mildew. That's one of the most common problems. And then broad mites and russet mites, I'd say, are like right behind the powdery mildew as much as an issue. And then fusarium, we're seeing a lot also. And all these issues have organic solutions, which in the past a lot of people didn't realize. And anything from using a trichoderma, which can kill all the microbes that are in your root zone, and then you obviously have to re-inoculate the beneficials, but it will kill that fusarium and help your plant bounce back so you don't completely lose it. The broad mite thing, we've definitely seen a lot of people have infestations, and with a couple products like the Grand Evo and the Venerate, been able to like knock it out and actually harvest their crop.
Wow. That's kind of incredible when you think about it, because man, every time I've ever seen those little things come into a garden, it's like, okay, we need to set off a nuclear bomb. We're going to be rebuilding in a different zone.
Yeah.
Well, that's the reality, right? Before you had those solutions, if you wanted to do organically, basically, if you had those types of situations, it was just cut and start all over again. So at least there's beneficial solutions now, as opposed to the having to restart all over again altogether.
I mean, the best solution is trying to have a healthy flora in your soil and have a healthy, beneficial microorganism population, so your plants are able to fight off anything that does come their way.
That's right.
But unfortunately, with so much interaction and people trading plants and people going to different gardens, these pests are like innovative and they figure out ways to get from one garden to another. And before you know it, that garden that you were sure of was clean and pest free could have been contaminated by, you know.
Can you hear me? Is this thing coming through?
One of the
Something.
one of the biggest diseases that you were talking about is powdery and downy mildew, right?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually the scientific name for like downy mildew is Peronospora. And so what happens with Peronospora is it actually it comes in the form of what's called an oospore. You guys ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay, so these oospores, they're like tiny little bowling balls, right? Like if you think about where earthworms come from, right? Where do earthworms come from? How do they just kind of colonize the soil when they're not there before? Where do earthworms come from in a healthy soil? They come from little eggs, and that's kind of how powdery and downy mildew come. They're in this little tiny oospore, which is like a bowling ball, very very small, very microscopic, and these guys can travel in from different soil mediums, anaerobic pockets within.
Whoa.
Somebody needs to quiet their mic.
Sorry about that, guys. Whoa, what is going on?
We got feedback. Okay, that was Indra. Indra, you need to work on your mic there, buddy.
Oh my gosh, I thought it was me. I was like, what is going on? Continue on, Peter. Continue on.
Okay, cool. So think about like these little oospores that are in, let's say, an anaerobic pocket of undecomposed compost, right? So you're making your soil mixture, and these little oospores are only going to incubate when obviously the temperature is perfect and the moisture is perfect, and that's how you're going to get the increase in colonization within the soil aggregates that could actually gain competency and then hit the root of the plant, and then boom, and it's going to spread to maybe one plant. But as that Peronospora colonizes the plant itself, it'll jump to other plants. So the universities will come out and tell you, hey, molds and mildews are just they're in the air, and it's an environmental factor. You're going to get it whether you want it or not. But what a lot of scientists, sustainable agriculture scientists, are finding is that these oospores are in the soil in high amounts, and there's really nothing that because again, they're these little like bowling balls. They're one of the hardest things, even with like a fumigant like methyl bromide or a systemic fungicide. These little oospores are super tough to destroy. They're almost impossible to destroy. So like let's see, Brian was saying, the only way to kind of inhibit the colonization of powdery and downy mildew, which are two of the most predominant diseases in your industry, as well as like you're saying, I think verticillium, fusarium, rhizoctonium, tritus, and pythium, all those guys are pretty big problems too. But if you can, again, I don't know your product, but soluble humus concentrate, if you can add humus, which contains 100% aerobic beneficial microorganisms, you can get that diversity and colonization up. It's going to limit the impact or colonization space on a microscopic level that Peronospora or powdery and downy mildew can actually have in your soil. But an important thing to know is that they are coming from the soil. Those microorganisms are developing in what you're bringing in with your soil medium. So you just have to be really careful on what you guys are using.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think a lot of people are like, due to the huge emergence of our industry, a lot of soil companies are like not necessarily doing their quality control on the compost that they're using, and they're using lower end ingredients in their soil to bring something to market that may be more affordable than others, but may not necessarily be helping the farmer because it's a uncomposted product or low end, or has ingredients in it that are more susceptible to these spores, like Peter said.
Yeah, totally, Brian. Like even in vermiculite or peat moss or something like that, and again, especially in the green waste, a lot of these guys, what they do is, they take the green waste from the community environments, and they let it sit in these huge anaerobic piles and just rot for about 9 months. And so, they feel like all the pathogens have been killed because the heat gets so high. But that's not always the case when you're looking at the microscopic pockets where these little balls of or oospores are sometimes smaller than a microorganism. They're really small, and they contain colonies of powdery and downy mildew. So
absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why we pride ourselves on using the highest quality ingredients and encouraging people to not cut corners just because they may have some local soil that has some mushroom compost from the local mushroom farm that hasn't really been properly composted, but is a giant waste stream. So basically, a lot of these waste streams just need to be educated on how to manage them properly, and the world could have a lot more higher end compost. And that's one thing that we have coming down the pipe. We have a project that we're going to work on that's going to we're going to be in charge of all the ingredients and the inputs and how the compost is actually made. So we're looking forward to that project for sure.
I used to make compost for a lot of years, and I made a Lupke compost, and that's out of Germany. And what it is it's an insoluble humus compost, and it's composted. We don't let it get past 140 degrees. So that way we can essentially just keep all the aerobic microbes. So we do, and we,
static.
Yeah, totally.
Correct.
It's turned, that process, and when you use compost. So we would turn it every day for the first 4 weeks. But even with that compost, when we did a microbial assay on it, it's almost impossible to eliminate 100% of the pathogenic organisms in any type of an organic material, because it's the natural balance. There are good and bad organisms within any type of agro ecosystem. So with that being said, what we've done with soil balance is we isolated 62 strains of pure beneficial microorganisms so that we don't have any inkling of a pathogenic in there. So we're making micro tea that is 100% pure, beneficial, aerobic, saprophytic organisms that actually work to help decompose some of the material in a compost that hasn't been fully decomposed yet. Because even if you're a master composter, you're never going to get 100% of the bad guys out in a compost. It's naturally impossible to get out all of the bad guys. So you have to be careful. Any organic material that you're bringing into your grow room, with those pockets. And like you said, the thing that you said, Brian, that makes so much sense is that if you inundate your environment with tons of beneficial organisms, a lot of the health issues, a lot of the things that growers trying to grow organic who are reactive to the health issues that they're facing, they just naturally won't have them anymore. Kind of like a human healthy body. Once your community is diversified, you're gonna have just plant health, vigor, and you're gonna have nutrient dense product, because those beneficials will act almost as like a chelating agent for the macro micronutrients in the soil.
I love that train of thought, Peter. I just got to say.
Go ahead, Wade. I just have to mute Peter's because you were getting a little bit of feedback. And welcome to Tony to the room as well.
Hey, Tony.
Congratulations, Tony. Big win last night.
Yeah, I want to talk a little more about what you were just speaking of, Peter. I think it's really important to recognize that these pathogenic organisms are everywhere. And it's really very difficult to create a scenario that is free of pathogens. But my experience has been from when I worked indoors, it was important to make sure everything was as clean as possible and as many beneficial organisms as possible. Now that I'm fortunate enough to be able to work outdoors on a farm where in the last coming on 8 years now, I've been able to build the beneficial organisms in the soil, learn how to make proper compost and source the materials that are going into that compost. And I'm finding that different cultivars, different versions of cannabis have better resistance than others to these various pathogens, particularly the mildews. I'm really finding that some of the things that are high in CBD, low in THC, which is primarily the focus of my interest, I'm really finding that there's so many different versions of this plant, and some of them are actually quite susceptible to mildews, and others don't seem to be bothered by it at all. And they have identical situation in my garden. So one of the things as a nurseryman I'm trying to learn more about is what cultivars flourish in different scenarios, and then to try and make that information available to as many people as possible so we can reduce some of the environmental impacts and increase the quality of the medicine that people are producing. I really think this thing you're talking about is really important. I
love what you're saying. And from a biological standpoint, you know, the question that you just asked, why are certain cultivars more or less resistant? And again, addressing that from a biological standpoint, I think it has a lot to do with the terpene that each individual plant is producing. You know, think about a natural agroecosystem. Let's say you're in Africa, let's say you're in Chile, right? You're going to have different biodiversity and different thresholds of, for instance, powdery or downy mildew. So that plant over time just naturally has co-evolved with its natural system to be able to inhibit the colonization of certain diseases so it can naturally survive. So when we're taking these strains and we're monocropping them or reproducing them in our own environment, if we don't have those exact strains aligned with that particular plant, then what's going to happen is the plant's not going to have its natural organisms that it co-evolved with in nature to be able to produce the terpenes that is necessary to inhibit pathogen colonization.
Yes.
It's an interesting idea.
That's good stuff. That is good stuff. Great panel today. I love the diversity. Some new folks in the room, some old schoolers. We got Mark Scaldone looking slightly like a Simpsons character with his green, with his green hue. But welcome, Dr. Mark. Hope you're doing well.
To me, really?
A little bit.
Oh, I could fix that. I'm not.
You know what? You kind of looked out the window and it almost went away a little bit there for a second.
Right. Should I lighten it up a little bit?
No. We love the green here, bro. You stay as green as you like, my friend.
So, Brian, are any of you guys working with the state of California regarding the new regulations? I know they're starting to talk about organic certification or working on that sort of idea so that, you know, people can actually take that full shift in the future so that they can actually get organic certification for their cannabis in the future in California?
Well, indirectly, yes. I mean, we've taken the proactive approach of getting all of our products certified with CDFA, which is California Department of Ag, in foreseeing that the future is going to be that, you know, going to go that route. It's much easier for a farmer to use a product that's already certified organic to get his own farm certified. So we did go that route for sure. And we're definitely working with a lot of farms in the Monterey County and just some of the more friendly counties that are allowing permitting to using our products and providing MSDS sheets and providing, you know, derivation statements so that they can get their approval for organic certification.
So we had a question from the chat room here. A lot of people asking about neem oil, and it seems like half the chat room's kind of like, oh, I use that, it's great. And the other half is like, oh, it's poison, you shouldn't use it. So many people have asked the question what the panel thinks about Yeah, maybe start with Brian. What do you think about neem oil?
Well, neem is definitely the active ingredient. Neem is azodactrin, and azodactrin is a pesticide. So neem kills things, and you know, it has its time and place. You know, so a lot of people have been putting neem cake in soil and neem seed meal in soil for quite some time, and I've always been like perplexed by this whole concept. And it's starting to come out that the neem seed meal is actually killing microorganisms in the soil and causing anaerobic conditions. So it doesn't surprise me. I'm not a scientist, but I have, you know, a lot of experience being a farmer, and I kind of like think of a plant like a human, and I like try to think, what does this plant need? Similar to like how I would think how a human would need nutrient. And by putting neem, something that's going to kill microorganisms in the soil, has always been counterintuitive for me. So it's something that I've always stayed away from. And now that the information is more and more is coming out, it totally makes sense to me. You know, we want to keep as much microbial life in the soil as possible, much oxygen. We want those microorganisms to be able to breathe down there.
Great answer. The best use I've ever seen of neem, the most natural use I've ever seen of it, was not, you know, extracting the oil, the plant oil and spraying it. But it was in Jamaica, where my friend had a giant neem tree in his garden. I'd never even seen one. It was like 40 feet tall, big, huge leaves on the thing. And the leaves would fall, and then he would just put them in the pathways. He was growing in, you know, classic Jamaica style inside tires. So all the earth was in the tire. So it was like even the neem that was falling on the ground wasn't probably really affecting the soil that the plants were in, although the rubber from the tires probably were. But I thought it was a neat use of neem in the sense that, because I was like, what are all these leaves that you've got that we're walking on over the pathways through the plants? And he's like, that's neem, man. And I looked up and I was like, damn, Jamaica style. You don't go buy a bottle of neem. You just use the entire plant. It seemed more natural to me.
Yeah, man, grow the tree, man.
Grow the tree. But I like your answer with this, you know, affecting the microbials. That's clearly, if you're not thinking about the microbials in your soil, then maybe neem might seem like a great idea to you. But coming to the understanding that it's potentially killing those or affecting their colony, then maybe it's not such a good idea.
I have similar feelings about neem. My particular objection to neem is that it's a hormone disruptor. It's one of the methods one of the ways it works on insects is by disrupting their breeding cycle. And I think we're putting way too many materials like that into the environment, hormone disruptors. You can look at all the weirdness that amphibians are showing in the environment, from everything from birth control pills to soaps and whatnot, who knows. But with cannabis, particularly if you're cultivating cannabis as medicine, it seems really essential to me that you wouldn't add anything to the plant, either systemically or as a foliar spray, that eventually could compromise the well-being of your end user. And particularly in the context of Caladrius Network, I've really had to focus on the cleanest, purest version of cannabis medicine that is possible to create. And so neem is one of the things that I ask the folks who cultivate for Caladrius Network to, if they use it, to tell us all about when and how they used it. I don't want to take a chance on hurting one of these kids that's using grams of oil a day, and we end up concentrating something like neem into their bloodstream, and who knows? Because again, I'm not a scientist. I tend to take a conservative position. I don't want to take any chance at all of hurting that end user.
I agree.
Well, so I don't like neem.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Go ahead.
I know people like Tony probably doesn't like neem much either, because it definitely affects the oil flavor and components and overall profile of it. So as more and more extractions been coming into play, neem's losing its place in cannabis, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
I have some information on the plant parasitic nematodes that I could share if you guys want to. So I work with quite a few different scientists, and with regards to like Meloidogyne, or which is root knot, or sting. There's lance nematodes. So there's quite a few different plant parasitic nematodes, and the plant parasitics are carbon feeders, right? So if you have a lot of plant parasitic nematodes, what they're going to do is they're going to cruise in, and they're going to go, and they're going to, your fine root hairs, the root hairs that actually absorb most of your micronutrients, those nematodes, especially like lance and sting, are going to eat those fine root hairs first before they attack the main root, because those are you hearing me okay, Bubble Man? Or is there like a static?
There's a little bit of a delay, but we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So those fine root hairs are the ones that the nematodes eat first. They got these little mouths. They go and they just gobble up because they're very like fibrous, fine root hairs. So that's the first thing that they eat. So that's the plant parasitic. Now, beneficial nematodes in the soil, what those guys will do is they actually feed on humus. So think about that. So those beneficial nematodes won't eat your roots. They will actually feed on humus, or like mineralized carbon in the soil. So there's a big difference on the beneficial and the plant parasitic, kind of like the bad guys of the bugs and the good guys of the bugs in the soil. So if you have a very healthy humus rich soil, you're going to counterbalance the nematode, essentially, multi-celled organisms that are in that soil. If you can really increase, your earthworm castings and your humification of that soil. The plant parasitics will still be there, and there's other things that you can do to inhibit, those, but that's a whole nother conversation. I'm just talking about the types, really.
I just wanted to let Brian know that I muted his mic, so when he goes to talk, to unmute it. It was the thing that was causing the tiniest little bit of feedback on Peter's microphone. So I know you're on a phone and it might be a little bit harder, but just try to click your mute button to unmute yourself when you talk. And yeah, here we go. Just figured I'd let him know. Oh, we might have lost him now. I don't know. So how did... Oh, there he is. He's back, but I don't know if he can unmute his mic now. Sometimes when I mute people's mics, it messes things up, but let me see if I can unmute you, Brian. Let's try now. No, he's still muted. Weird. Lets me mute him, but not unmute him. I've always been confused. Oh, there, you're unmuted now.
All right. Sorry if I'm causing any issues.
No, you're fine. Just, I guess when you don't speak, it's best if you can mute your mic on your phone there.
If I could figure out how to do it. Oh, I think I see it. Yeah, no problem.
I know it's trippy, right?
Yeah, I'm technologically challenged. I'm a plant guy, not a computer guy.
Hey, that's okay, man. I'm glad you made it in today anyway to share with us, and I'm glad that it's because I wanted to hook you up with Peter. Anyway.
Yeah, Peter, I'd like to talk more off air, for sure.
Yeah, and then Wade was like, "Oh, I got to bring Wade in too because he's just like he's exactly what all of you guys are talking about, put into three-dimensional reality for the last I don't know how many years of his life." So, just seems
sounds like he's a neighbor too. Yeah, Wade, I'd like to get together sometime for sure.
Look forward to it, man. I'll come in and ask for you.
Please do. Please do.
Yeah, next time I'm up there in Incline, I have a dispensary in Incline. I'm gonna have to swing over to Nevada City and come say hi.
Yeah, we definitely got to reconnect Etienne for sure.
Please.
Absolutely, we must sesh.
Yeah. I was also going to say earlier when Brian was talking about, or sorry, it was Wade who was just talking about not wanting this responsibility of dealing with catastrophically ill children who are extremely hypersensitive to anything. Let's just be honest. Our confidence, our faith, what we believe in is cannabis. We believe in cannabis. We believe in the profile. We believe in the terpenes. We believe in the cannabinoids. What we maybe don't believe in is, a whole shit ton of products like sprays. And, I'm with Wade on that, where it's just sort of like when in doubt, throw it out, stick with the most popular, best sort of way of going about it, which is maybe by breeding plants that are, you know, going to be maybe a little bit more pushing away these certain pests and mildews and whatnot. I've definitely seen it in a room. I've gone into a room and I've seen all the cushions just covered in powdery mildew. And then there's one in the background. I was like, what's that over there? It's like, oh, that's like a Congolese, you know, one of these African kind of exotic cultivars. And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't have any powdery mildew. Why do you have one Congolese in your room and 400 Kush when you grow in the Pacific Northwest? I'm just curious.
No, I think it's a huge thing. There is a wide range of different cultivars available. And what I think we're missing is sharing information with each other about cultivars that flourish in the different environments we're in. Just in the folks that I've worked with in the last few years, folk on the Central Coast or even the North Coast have a really different set of problems, if you will, and different group of cultivars seem to flourish between those two areas and an area like Nevada County, where I'm at. We have incredibly hot, very low humidity summers. And meanwhile, along the coast, you've got high humidity from the marine layer, and rarely do you get high temperatures in the heat of day because the fog gets drawn in. So my sense is that what I've tried to do is learn more about, like you were mentioning, the Congolese. It seems to me that that's a radically different set of conditions that plant evolved in than what some of the other cultivars from the Kush area of India might have evolved in. And I think the trick for us is sorting out what are the genetics of the plants we're working with and what are the environmental conditions those plants are seeking so that they can flourish.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
The one thing I've noticed is seems like people aren't necessarily growing what is the most proper plant to grow for their region.
Yes.
People are growing for all sorts of purposes, somewhat financially driven, somewhat terpene driven. So that's the one thing that like cannabis is like has such a like broad spectrum of types of cultivars, and you know where plants may be more appropriate may not be as desirable to some people as others, and so on and so forth. So that makes things really complicated as far as like a cannabis grower choosing a cultivar. It would be nice to be able to just grow the things that are best in your region, but we all like a little variety in life, and people, you know, have options. So that's one thing that like greenhouses and indoor and taking advantage of your environment, environmental controls and things like that are able to do. But in general, I think providing the most natural environment for your plant, from the soil to the air to everything else, has to always be taken into consideration. So if you are growing something that is out of your region, then you may have to provide a greenhouse for it or some sort of different environment than it's normally used to. Just take into consideration that give it what it wants, and it'll give you what you want to get from it.
Yes. I would share a little story if you want to hear it. I've worked with ACDC, which is a cultivar that produces CBD about 25 or 30 times the amount of CBD and in the plant material as there is THC. And particularly for some of the kids that I work with, that's really a desirable characteristic. But I believe ACDC was first identified as a plant of interest along the North Coast of California. And over there, it seems to flourish. And I've met people who work with it indoors. And the beauty of indoors, of course, is you can create the climate you want. And ACDC, the first 2 years I worked with it outdoors in my garden here in Nevada County, it grew like a fern. It could barely hold its own weight up. And then I met folk who were working with it indoors and said, no, it's very much a typical heavy bearing, strong plant. And when I discussed how that could be when I was growing it outdoors and seeing something that acted like a fern, we got to talking about temperature and humidity. And so last year, I had 4 little plants of ACDC that I put in the ground under a shade structure, where the shade structure would allow 60% transmittance of light, and the fabric was white. And meantime, I use wood chips in abundance with various types of grass types for mulch, and I keep the mulch moist for evaporative cooling. And the ACDC last summer, instead of growing like a fern, very much grew like a more conventional plant. And from those 4 little plants that I didn't put out until June 20th, I got almost just a hair over 6,000 grams from 4 little plants, put out June 20th. And from those plants, the medicine makers I was working with then, they got 1,100 grams of oil, which is extraordinarily 22% yield. So on their extraction.
Wow.
Clearly did really well. And that
Awesome.
is way more plant material than it ever produced in my garden in the 2 previous years I'd worked with it. And I had more plants then, but they struggled to do heat.
How did it do the extraction?
The hexane, it's a hexane extraction with a Stoflex machine.
Soxhlet extractor? Yeah.
Yes. And Rotovac to draw the hexane off, and terpene separation at the final stages of extraction of the solvent.
And was this a high CBD cultivar?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
here's a question for you. Now, this is my own theory, and it may hold no water whatsoever, but what I notice is when I do extractions with mechanical screen separation, whether dry or wet, bubble hash or dry sifting, that I'm able to get the sessile and the capitate stalked trichomes, but the bulbous stay behind. You get a very, very small yield when I work with high CBD cultivars, and my theory is that the majority of the profile is inside those bulbous heads, and they need to be melted off or heated off, steam distilled, solvent extraction, whatever, in order for you to actually get that yield. Have you seen a half of a yield coming out of this material when you run it through sifting or wet washing?
Back in the day when I was first working with Harlequin, I enjoyed smoking hash in those days as well. And yeah, Harlequin is not a great producer in the hash realm, is my experience. And I think it's part of why my medicine makers were working with hexane, is they got such good results for extractions. I'd be interested in hearing what Tony had to say about this, because I've heard something similar to what you were just asking about, Brian, but I don't really know, Marcus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know John Burfellow, who's not here today. I'm just going to let Tony's eating right now, so I'll answer, and then he can come.
Cheers.
He can chime in right after me. Just that John Burfellow has also seen the same thing with the Haley's Comet. Cheryl T. Rose, whose daughter Haley has a form of epilepsy, that they came up with this high CBD cultivar called Haley's Comet. And it was the same way. Like when we ran it through screens, when we ran it through water hash, the yields were just so low that it, you know, and it's really hard when you're trying to produce an actual medicine for someone. Now, the interesting thing is that the much higher yields were gotten through oil extractions, but hey, and I wish Cheryl was here to share this because it's really her information more than anyone's, but Haley had been on this oil for some time, and her seizures went down 80%, some massive number. She was still having seizures, but it wasn't until she started making bubble hash with this particular cultivar that she stopped all her seizures. Now, I'm sure that they have come back because I think that they maybe lost the cultivar or something had happened. But she went for hundreds of days, maybe over 200. I'd have to once again get Cheryl T. Rose, and any of you want to Google Cheryl Rose as well as Haley, you can find out all about them and go support them because they're really good people. But just some interesting thing that I found. Wouldn't it be interesting if CBD was being produced in higher amounts in bulbous trichomes? And if so, why?
Did they winterize the hexane extract?
It was all done, yeah, with temperature and vacuum. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by winterized, but no, the plant material would get dried to 1 or 2% moisture content.
Right. So
And,
hexane will dissolve wax, fats, and lipids, right?
Lipids,
And so if you're going to dissolve those components, they have to be removed. And winterization is the process by which they're removed. I was just wondering if they winterize their hexane extract. Because you're going to get oil from that. Like you said, they're getting CBD oil. Well, purified CBD, we all know, is a white crystalline solid. So what are the other components that are in there? And what's the CBD concentration in the oil that they extracted?
we've seen as much as, I don't remember the specific variety, but we had a 70-some percent CBD and 2% THC oil that in abundance.
Right. So there's about 25, 26, 28% other stuff in there, right?
Yes.
So that's probably other extracted fats and waxes.
Waxes is my take on it. Yeah, it's a heavy oil, tarry, not clear at all. But again, because I don't know, I'm really trying for a whole plant extract. I want all of it. I asked the guys to mix the terpenes back into the oil when they give it to us.
Is it encapsulated in the soxhlet extraction?
No. Most of the oil is still in the acid form.
That's interesting. That's really kind of cool, because you would think in the I'll explain what a soxhlet is. So soxhlet is kind of like a little cup that sits in the reflux zone of a solvent that's being boiled, and so in this case it's hexane. And so what happens is the hexane vapor sort of recondenses on the
cooling coils,
cold finger, or whatever it is that's the cold surface in there.
We have
some people have
called
typically called a reflux condenser, and so from the condenser then the fresh solvent drops over the plant material and then goes back into the pot, and it just does that. It's kind of like making coffee, right?
Yes.
In an old coffee percolator, not a single pass Keurig or something. This is like the coffee percolator that you put coffee into and you put water into and you boil it like the cowboys did, on the stove or something. So so the soxhlet is basically interesting because, again, you're passing through hexane after it's condensed, so it's no longer hot, but it's typically in a hot zone of a condenser, in that it's kind of below where the reflux condenser is, which again is stuff that's being condensed back at room temperature. So it's basically just running through there, but you're going to concentrate in the hexane pot down below, which then they strip on the rotovap. And again, you could probably strip hexane without doing much decarb. I'm just surprised that in that whole soxhlet extraction process they can't just decarb. Now, another interesting thing is a good recrystallization solvent for the cannabinoid acids are things like hexane and pentane. They're very, very nonpolar, and if you could saturate that solution on your rotovap, might be able to chill it down cryogenically and actually crash out CBDA crystals. So it would be cool if you could actually concentrate and make a CBDA isolate that's that concentrated. You could just crash out the crystals. CBDA is somewhat of an elusive thing, again, just because of decarboxylation. So if you take like an ethanol extract, or if you do anything where you have to do multiple strippings on rotovaps, you figure that you're going to end up heating it up to some point that you may get some adventitious decarboxylation. But being able to get CBDA as a crystalline solid would be really fucking cool, because then you could just, decarboxylate that to make activated CBD without having all the other fats, waxes, and lipids. And those are often the culprits for giving those purified cannabinoids off flavors, because when the fats, waxes, and lipids are heated up, they thermally degrade into noxious smelling compounds. Go ahead.
Well, thanks for that knowledge drop, and welcome Skunkman Sam and Alec from SC Labs to the room. I think we got a full panel, gentlemen. Almost 700 people on the live viewing, and the chat is bumping.
Hey.
Testing.
Good morning.
You are tested.
I passed this time. I found out what was wrong with the microphone. It was plugged in 2 different places. Hey,
Oh, Jesus.
I'd like to ask a question. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name.
Peter.
Peter. I sent off for some of your stuff, and then I was talking to my friend who still lives in Phillipsburg, Kansas, and he volunteered to go over to where the largest 7,000-acre plants of pot growing that I've ever seen in a long time, besides in Rishikesh, India. But he volunteered to go over and dig around amongst the roots and send me a sample of the stuff he came up with. And I thought maybe you might be interested in having that sample to have a look at, because it's just marijuana plants growing there.
Yeah, so what we can do is we can actually test the colonies that are actually conducive to cannabis plant growth in the rhizosphere. So we do microbial analysis basically, and we look at all the different beneficials that we know are going to be conducive to all of the things that we're talking about. And we can actually isolate and tell you how many what are called colony forming units or microorganisms per gram of soil that you contain not only in the soil aggregates, but in the rhizosphere. So if you wanted to send us a sample, I could pretty much analyze, the beneficials that are there, and then, and that's something you could start to do. That's something that our company hopefully will begin to do in the future, is help people become microbe farmers, and actually have a precedence on the amount of colony forming units or microorganisms per gram of soil that are conducive to the results that you guys are all talking about, which interrelate to every aspect of what this plant's genetic capability is.
I really love the panel right now. I gotta say, just looking at, master breeder Skunkman Sam and the work that Wade's done with the AC/DC and the Harlequin. You got Brian in from Vital, like trying to share the good soil information. Alec from SC Labs coming in, who's testing everything. Peter with the soil balance, the living bacteria to symbiotically live on the roots and up, and then you've got the scientist Mark Chaldon in the house laying it down. And congratulations on your new patent, bro. Like seriously, congratulations. And then it doesn't even end there, because then we have Indra, old school, storyteller extraordinaire with like the oil history that goes back 30 plus years. And then the future, we got Tony Verzura, who's pumping out products like you can't even believe, xylitol sugars and terp syrups, and blowing my mind even, dude. I'm the bubble man and you all humble me. Thank you all for sharing your time today. And I know the panel or the chat room right now is absolutely loving this. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting this together. Awesome. What a beautiful synergy, man, that you've created. So you are an eclectic human being who's brought some amazing individuals here. So thank you.
Yeah, dude, right on. So I guess what's to talk about? Maybe a little bit about Chalice. I think what did they give you a backpack for all those trophies, Tony?
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting event. It's still going on today, but I felt kind of geeky. I think so did Joe. But when Alex was kind of telling people on, did he disappear from this panel?
No, I'm here.
Oh, it's just such a big panel. I see. You have to move it. Yeah. So, I think that what you guys are talking about is really important, and I think it all comes down to responsibility and also education. And if you're going to be in the industry, you have to take some responsibility. And if we had a commission, like there's an NFL commission, or there's different industries and organizations out there that have to abide by commissions, and those commissions haven't been set up yet for for cannabis yet. We're still working on trying to regulate this and monitor every gram and make sure people aren't, in these regulated states, they're not using pesticides and concentrating them and putting them into edibles and into public, which is harm's way. But there's no real repercussions of responsibility. And so when you look at that and you say, okay, what does that really mean? Well, there's things that I would like to say that are what we need to create, the 10 commandments, if you will, the things that are not acceptable if you're going to be in the industry. And if you're going to be in the industry, you need to be held accountable, and there's things that are out there that exist that even blow my mind. So a lot of people with the prohibition-based mentality think that specifically in the distillate world, that somehow you can make some kind of shitty, contaminated BHO and clean it up into some magical golden oil that will test clean of all contaminants, pesticides, residuals, and things. And maybe once upon a time that was like a thing to do, to like take somebody's really nasty, dirty oil and do that. But I think that the competition that was held at Chalice and the standards that the labs are trying to be preaching to everyone out there isn't necessarily just about pesticides, but it's a responsibility as the grower and the extractor come together to produce a product that is acceptable for public consumption, since there's no commission and no one's really regulating that right now. Especially in California, where there's the biggest, one of the biggest markets in the country, if not the world. And so in the categories that we had, with distillation, is we're not taking some kind of contaminated shitty BHO and turning it into magic. We're doing whole plant extractions on flowers that were grown by unbelievable growers, greenhouse growers like Lemon Tree, all organic, and what Brian was talking about with certified green growers. These are growers that go through particular certification processes in which they don't spray their plants. They have healthy genetics, and they have a healthy way of sustaining those genetics. And what I mean by that in responsibility is, you've got to be able to have the right starting material. So we're starting with the best material, making the best particular oil that we can make, and then a distillation is just a final refinement of cleaning it up to the most highest concentration. So if you have any hiccups along the way, you're just going to concentrate your mistakes. So really, when somebody says distillation, think microscope. Very, 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 very strong microscope into what you're doing. And so it's not a process in which you should use to fix a mistake, but rather refine your process to the highest quality and standard that it could be, if that's the desired product. And now I'm going to put some people on blast. So I told some people I was going to. So I'm going to go a little further. I hate to do this to people, but I'm not going to call any names out, but I'll show you some of the things that are not acceptable in our industry. And if there was a commission, I would fine this person $500,000 and 10 years out, 10 years to be ousted from the industry without review. So if we had a commission of cannabis and you saw what I'm about to show you, these types of people should be fined minimum $500,000 to $1 million for the damage in which they're causing. And they don't know. And we're going to talk about why they got here. So let's look at this phone and you will be seeing something.
Ooh.
This
Jesus.
is not fucking acceptable.
Super impressive.
That's crazy, dude. What the fuck?
What you're looking at, people, is the spider mites covered buds completely.
Oh.
That's when it's like worst case scenario.
Oh.
That's as bad as it gets. If you see a bud completely covered like that, burn it with fire.
Oh my
And
God.
even eagles.
It's not extractable.
Let me tell you why.
That made me feel sick.
Exactly. So
It made my heart beat really fast.
there is nothing you can do when you get to this stage except pull out a fucking blowtorch and torch your entire garden.
That's
Oh.
negligence at that point.
Maybe the property
No.
too.
That's beyond negligence. That's just outright denial.
I thought it was a piece of hat.
It's beyond denial.
I thought those were crystals.
Domino.
Remind me not to smoke hash with Mark.
So, now,
I think my eyes are going.
when they put people on blast last year and they said, hey, by the way, you entered Chalice and this is what you failed, there was, I think there was like 80 or 90%. This year, knowing that they put you on blast, actually, I feel like there was some change that happened because there was about 40 or 50%, even though they knew they were going into competition mode and they could test all of their stuff before it ever even gets entered because SC Labs could test your shit before you even enter it. So you're going into competition mode and they're going to put you out and they're going to put you on blast. So this year about 40 or 50% and in some categories 20%. So I was happy to see the numbers came substantially down because people are becoming more and more aware. And when they talk about pesticides and they say, oh, well, really, what could that do? Well, if you've got an autoimmune disorder and you smoke something, pesticides, you could die. There's the word is death. There's catastrophic human change that can happen when you are consuming pesticides or combinations of pesticides, which we're going to talk about in this.
And concentrates of them.
And then vape them directly through your blood-brain barrier.
So, yeah, we talked about, this is something to keep in mind. We talked about if you take a clone from, say, a mothering room and they use Eagle 20 and it's stemic and it's in the plant and they clone it, and then they're like, okay, we've got tons of these clones, and that grower never uses pesticides. Tough titty. You're growing with contaminated genetics. And so the genetics is extremely important. If we all started from seed, we have a very fair shot of having something that's clean. But if you start from a clone, you need to have a clean room. So when I walk into other people's grows, and trust me, there's examples of the opposite of what I showed you. Like when we talk about, we were working with Green Dragon, who is the complete opposite of a grow like that, who's monitoring all of these things. So if you see a grow and somebody's like, oh yeah, well, where do you get your clones from? Where do you get your mothers from? And there is no mother room, okay? And you're cloning from your garden. So if you're cloning from your garden, you better be the best fucking grower and have all of these points in place and all these checks in place, because imagine this is how this garden got this way, okay? At one point they had a grow, their first pull or their second pull was pretty decent, and all of a sudden some of the girls got a little cough. The weather changed, right? They get a little bit of a condition, they get a little scratchy throat, and they're like, oh, let's use this remedy here. And it might be a pesticide, or it might be some kind of chemical that will try to help this cough. So instead of there being a cough once a week, there's a little scratch, a little cough. Then they clone it. So now you've cloned your first condition and you've passed it along the chain. Then let's say if it was humans, let's say that particular batch now has cancer. Okay, and then you clone it. Now you've got the cough, you've got cancer. Then the next time, well, let's just throw AIDS at it. Let's throw MS at it. Let's just start throwing every possible health condition you could possibly throw into this gene mix, and keep mixing and keep cloning and keep cloning. So eventually where you get is you've got cocktails of pesticides and different chemicals that you're fighting. Well, I've got thrifts, I've got spider mites, I've got green moss that produces more. And having topside spiders, full-on webs around your buds is not acceptable. Vacuuming them off, washing them in hydrogen peroxide.
Vacuuming them off.
That's their answer.
Oh
What are
my
you gonna
God.
do? I'm going to vacuum them off.
I would drop a nuclear bomb on that facility. I would first go and apologize to all my neighbors and let them punch me in the face as many times as they wanted to, because I'm seriously sick to my stomach for their neighbors. I'm not even joking. That is.
I can honestly say, Tony, that I've seen much worse.
Oh yeah.
Where? Visiting somewhere, or in your own garden?
People's greenhouse facilities,
Right.
especially novice growers who just have no experience.
Yeah, I saw the similar situation in Los Angeles back in the late '90s, and the entire garden, which was probably 8 by 8, and every bud looked just like that. And the guy was like, "What's wrong?" Like, yeah, fire, fire, kill it with fire.
I was like, well,
No, you can produce a special product that we used to produce called Mighty Weed.
Yeah, well, if you were growing for the bugs, which is what I said, I don't know if you're just in the business for cultivating spider mites, mutated spider mites for our generations to come, because you've done an excellent job with cocktail bombs of every type of pesticide you could possibly throw at this thing. And you've got a topside party. I mean, this is like Tupac's come back, and he's like king of all the pesticides out there. Ain't nothing but a gangster and the bugs are party. Okay. Like,
actually, if you used pesticides, your plants would have looked a lot better. It just would be terrible for you.
Listen, since you started talking, Tony, the look on Brian and Wade and Peter's face has just been because we started this conversation with the highest integrity, the sick children, this is why we're doing this. It is kind of crazy to see, just metaphorically, how ridiculous some of these contests are, man. Like, what are people thinking?
Well, and this is somebody that's growing in the Los Angeles area that would think that's acceptable, and it's not acceptable. And
no. We as a group need to take people like that and do the Game of Thrones, strip them naked, walk behind them with bells. Shame. That's what you should be doing at Chalice. You should be having those bastards walk around naked, yelling.
Well, listen, it's one thing for a contest. It's one thing for a recreational market. The fact that it could be leaching over into this medicinal component and to this, for people who are really sick, it becomes really not funny. And on a side note, and I'm going to get right back to you, Tony, I have to shout out Etienne, because I forgot Etienne. How could you forget Etienne? He's been first in the room every day for the last 146 episodes. The guy's been an activist longer than I've been into cannabis. He's definitely one of the pioneers, and he's one of the kindest souls I've ever met. So I do want to shout out, as well as I already did the rest of the panel, my good friend Etienne. Thanks for being you.
Thank you kindly. And I want to give a shout out to my biological father. He passed away day before yesterday. So thank you very much for the love and support everybody have shown. And I'm doing my best. Everything's good. And I appreciate the love there, Bowman.
Much love. Much love.
Much love, brother.
And and just to kind of throw in, just from what Tony and everybody was just kind of discussing with regards to kind of some nasty practices, oftentimes unknowingly nasty practices, completely ignorant practices that are being made, especially around using a lot of these systemic pesticides. One of the something that just complicates the whole topic that much more also is the difference of whether or not plants were grown under the sun, exposed to UVA, B, and C, versus any type of indoor lighting, which is completely void any type of UVA, B, or C, which is one of the biggest thing that is what's breaking down systemic residual pesticides. And so, for so long, working within the hydroponic industry, hydro stores, so much information was passed out to the community, and, on forums, everybody thought, the Eagle 20 lasts 60 days or 40 days residually on the plant. And, it was just this kind of ignorantly agreed upon kind of thought, to justify, somewhat unscrupulous actions of, people just getting away with spraying whenever they spray, because they didn't preventatively take care of their issues, and instead they're reacting to full web mode, and so with that being said, say once moms are treated or what have you, and then grown in, indoor lighting mom rooms, I'm very curious on how much longer the, kind of systemic residue is compared to, something that might be grown under the sun, which in its own is going to have a really long residue effect. But I think that's just like throws a huge bomb in the whole situation too.
You bring up a good point, because the Eagle 20 belongs to the class of azoles, and all azoles require biological degradation to basically degrade those in the environment. And again, in an indoor environment where you have a different microbiome than you have outside, and like you bring up a good point with the photolytic degradation, but the microbes, the pseudomonads that live in the soil, are basically the things that are responsible for most of the degradation of those things. And most azole fungicides like miconazole and stuff like that have very low mammalian toxicity. They don't really have much. I mean, they're used for athlete's foot and those types of topical applications for yeast infections and stuff like that, because they're very broad spectrum and they're typically low toxicity. What is the issue is when they're heated, concentrated, and when they're heated up, because most of those are chock full of nitrogens, and a lot of those nitrogen containing compounds degrade to all kinds of nitroso and oxides and all kinds of Hoffman degradation products that you don't want to be inhaling into your lungs.
Mark, isn't formaldehyde one of those materials that shows?
Formaldehyde is just in general a degradation product that's just almost ubiquitous in the environment right now, because it's used in so many different applications as a monomer in plastics. The monomer of Bic lighters, which is basically formalin, just polyformaldehyde, is formaldehyde itself. And so, yeah, when those things thermally degrade, they release formaldehyde. What they're finding now is paraffin-based candles, like, I don't want to throw them under the bus, but like Yankee Candle brand and most popular brand candles that are paraffin-based have a lot of residual formaldehyde and formaldehyde components and degradation crap that's left behind, and they don't know if that's responsible for cancer or anything, but it's just exposing people more to formaldehyde. And yeah, formaldehyde is typically a thing you don't want to be exposed to if you can help it. But to get back to the azoles for a second, the thing with
who are you calling an azole?
Who you calling? They're conazoles, or man, there's like tebuconazole, propiconazole, flucilazole. There's so many different ones. It's just amazing somehow that the one that when thermally heats, can degrade and give off cyanide. It's the one in Eagle 20, right? It's just amazing that that's the one that's so widely used. There's so many other ones that you don't have the cyanide issue with at all. And that's the only one really that I can think of that it's got the, you heat this up and basically it degrades to hydrogen cyanide. Well, it's at a much lower concentration typically, but again, when you concentrate these things into concentrates, God knows if you have something that's in high concentration, could you actually get enough cyanide to basically get the dab that'll essentially kill you because you're overwhelmed by cyanide. I don't think that that's actually possible unless it's in there in like super, super high levels, because if it's based on the actual toxic dose of hydrogen cyanide, you would need to have a lot of Eagle 20 in your dab to basically keel over from it.
Well, let me share
microdoses of those synthetics over time.
Yeah, I was going to share a couple things that you guys were talking about also with the different extractions. Let's stick to bubble hash for one moment and pesticides. What we do now is we work for different farms, particularly for whether it's Prana or Bubbleman now. But let's stick to Prana because that's the one that I usually taking intake on CBD material, and I've bought material from Wade before and from Brian. So on the opposite note, hats off to the people that actually know how to grow and understand that from the second the leaf comes out of the plant, there's resin there, and what you put into the plant is what you're going to get out of it every time. And so my hats are off to the people that are actually doing a good job, because those are the ones that I seek out. But we have an account with SC in a bulk testing. And now what we do is, as soon as we get flowers, we say, okay, well, is there a pesticide test done at the lab? If the answer is no, then we send the flowers off. We take 10 grams of the flowers, we press those flowers off. We take that flower oil and we send that off. We clean the plates and clean everything and sterilize in UV between each one of those runs of flowers. And we have we have 3 presses, so we have one particular press we can dedicate to that. So we get a concentrate, the plant might test under the pesticide level, but then if you make a flower oil, and this is why I would say a lot of people are kind of against flower rosin, because you have to have extremely clean flowers, because then you're concentrating all of these oils and anything that's on the plant right there without any kind of first, second pass or any kind of refinement like what Indra does, with a hydrocarbon or anyone else that would use a solvent. They've got different passes and refinements that they can get a lot of things out. So we've seen a lot of crazy failures. So to the point where I actually called my manager to tell SC Labs, hey, by the way, we're not making this. We're just testing batches for different people that want us to buy. And it's failing pretty poorly. But in the water hash, so with flowers, you might not see it until it's concentrated, and then it's too late, and then you're down the road with all of your medicine and your lab contaminated. So there's a step there. But with particular water hash, what I've seen, and I've seen this twice now, not saying anyone's names or anything like that, but these are different farmers that are growing outdoors in greenhouse. And the trim itself, maybe they said, oh, well, we don't use any pesticides, we're clean. Okay, that might be fair. But some of my friends had said, hey, do you want to buy, this full spectrum bubble hash? And the bubble hash was testing in the parts per million, like 2 to 4. So washing the resin, separating the resin might have gotten.
Of what? What was the contaminant, Tony?
Oh, it was microbrutinol or whatever.
Microbutanol, Eagle 20.
Yeah, it was like, bro, we'd sent something to you and it was like 4 part. It was like a 4, not 0.4, not 0.01, 0.4. It was 4. And that was in the rosin concentration. They thought that maybe the hash didn't have it, so they tested the bubble and then they tested the hash rosin, and both of them tested highly positive. So what I'm getting at is that for whatever reason, even if you're washing and separating the resin, you might be able to not see any PM, because we talked about this before, where actually around the resin heads, you might not actually see any PM, but the pesticides are getting in, that are attaching themselves or getting into that resin in some capacity. And
test the flower?
The resin, not the plant material.
But you didn't test the plant material.
I didn't have the plant material to test. They were trying to sell
plant material to test.
They're trying to give us bubble, and then they were trying to give us hash rosin. And both of them would test positive. But what I'm getting at is the resin. So somebody washed it, separated it, dried it, went through that process. It's still in the resin, is what I'm getting at. So it's not just in it's inherently in the actual resin. So
what I'm hearing is going on a lot is people are even like testing their flour and it's coming in clean, and then when it concentrates, then they're seeing signs of some of these other toxic pesticides.
That was exactly the reason why I was asking Tony if that's what we're seeing here. Is you're not seeing it in the flour. You think the flour is clean, process the flour into a hash or a rosin in this case, and now the rosin's coming up hot. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what you're hearing.
That's one of the things that's like really scary to me, because here are all these people sourcing plants from all over the place, and that who knows how many generations down the line there could have been this, toxic chemical used where it's still going to show up. So that's something that Vital is working with. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, here's where sample preparation and sample collection, if you're processing a whole lot of material, but you're only taking a bud from this branch over here.
Right.
Well, again, you need to be able to represent the entirety of the material if you're going to be doing a statistically significant measurement.
Well, I
right?
think we got to take a more proactive approach on the other end of things and provide clean plants so farmers can be assured that they're going to make medicine that is acceptable in our modern testing facilities.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, if you're in a business where you're buying wholesale, or you have a deal and it's like, okay, someone's bringing you some herb, it looks really good, but you don't know whether or not it's contaminated. You need to do a really statistically valid measurement of the entire batch to make sure that you don't have pesticide contamination surprises like this.
So
absolutely. Well, go ahead, Tony. Sorry.
Yeah, real quick. That's actually what we're using the flour rosin for. So if somebody has 10 pounds, you could take 20 grams randomly from those 10 pounds, stuff a couple screens, press out 20 grams, get a blend of all those batches. That's why I like flour rosin. Then you get the flour rosin just for testing purposes.
Yeah, it's a good way to test for sure.
And you're like, okay, now I've got 2 or 3 grams to send to the lab and do that. It's a super good way to check that before you get too down. But I also think this opens up a new era of clone certification, meaning when the plant's in its mother stage, take a cut of the leaf, go get the leaf tested, and get us and see if we can get. Maybe this doesn't exist yet, but I thought maybe it could get there. I mean, SC could probably answer this, but if there was a way to test the leaf, not the bud, while it's in veg.
Yeah, no, that's when it's going to be in the highest concentration ever, seen by the plant, in the time when it was dipped. So, I mean, just from,
if we had a mother, so if we say, okay, where are these clones from? This mother was certified. Then we made these clones. These clones are now have to go through a certification process. Then there's the genetic banks is where it starts. So if you're going to be a clone bank or you're going to be a genetic bank, you need to have these certification processes, because farmers, like what Brian is saying, is like, let's say the farmer does everything right. He's got live soils. He's doing the greenhouse. He's got it controlled. He fucking slaves over months. He's bought all these clones. He's like, I'm an all organic grower. He doesn't test positive in his flowers. Somebody says, okay, great. We're getting this, our collective is going to purchase these flowers and make it into all this great, amazing medicine. We do a quick rosin test or a first batch of bubble, and it's wah. And now they failed, but they didn't do anything particularly wrong. This is happening all over. So now we're actually destroying and pushing out good farmers that are trying to be in the industry, because we don't have this very significant first step checks and balances on the genetics.
Right. And Tony, and on that, I think there's a couple things I wanted to kind of bring up on that point. As if you're farming and you're growing the herb, it's pretty cut and dry. You either sprayed a systemic or you didn't. You either sourced treated clones that were treated by moms. The mom plants are treated with imidacloprid or forbid or whatever. Or you're growing them in the house or from seed, where you're able to control that supply chain aspect that much more. Or even more horrifying, if you could run into this whole idea, which in the National Organic Program, there's an acronym for it. It's called UREC, UREC, which is Unavoidable Residual Environmental Contamination. And it's a term used to that the National Organic Program has an effect to help organic products still get on the market, for people that are certified organic, but they're in between a neighboring strawberry farm and grape farm who aerial dive bombs with myclobutanol, but yet they're certified organic, and this whole kind of idea of trace part per billion detectable levels of these pesticides, coming from the inputs that we use, and source, for certain dirty sources of compost, like in Colorado, where, kind of lighting people off for imidacloprid, and it came back to this, heady source of compost that's ultimately being made from kind of municipality kind of lawn trimmings, that are treated with imidacloprid. And so I mean, the whole input review reality is such a major issue now because of all these unlisted wait, sorry, 1 second.
Well, and coupled with the ability to look at the part per billion level, because when you look at part per billion, you're going to find just a whole host of everything, because it's just, right. I liken it to taking a lint brush to a New York City sidewalk. You're going to find.
Hey, Mitch was saying something good when you were talking about that. You can get right back to it in 1 second, Alec. I just wanted to mention what Mitch had said in the room, which was a simple, asking these growers when they're, giving their material to be processed or first tested, to get a sample of their water, or at least be told what kind of water they're using and what the nutrients are. Like, what are you using? Just tell me what you're using. I want a list. I want to know what you're using. I don't want to find it later. Just tell me.
Well, the series of interviews that goes on now, at least from my end, it's like it becomes an intimate interview. It's like, all right, brother, let's talk about everything you're doing. Like, what do you mean?
It becomes an investigation.
Yeah, because what happens? Even with the green dragon, how long did that investigation take? An hour and a half of you and I talking to him about every single step of his entire grow and what he goes through. Are you using Quest filtrations and HEPA filters and UVs in your rooms? What are your mothers like? What are your conditions like? Where are your genetics coming from? It's like a plethora of every single thing.
You don't even need to ask any of those questions in a sense. You can just say, listen, we're passing this on to the scientists, and they're going to run it through all sorts of fancy machines and come out with numbers and graphs. And man, I'm telling you, it's going to look bad on you if you put some shit in here you weren't supposed to. Go ahead, Alec.
Hey, one thing I was going to say, sorry to interrupt real quick. I do have to cut out soon, but I'm involved in a project, and we're working closely with SC Labs and EnviroCan. We're actually Pacific Reserve is the name of our nursery we're opening in Monterey County, and we're going to specialize in clean, green, organic certified genetics that people don't have to worry about purchasing, that are not going to be contaminated. So that's a big important part of my whole concerns as far as being an organic advocate and allowing getting product to people so they can do their job without having problems.
Do you have any idea how many generations? Let's say you have a mother plant that's made the fuck out of some of these systemics. Then you make a small clone from it. You grow that at another facility that's totally clean. And there is still little tiny bits of systemic left in that plant. So you grow it big and you chop it up and you start making more clones. You treat it as a mother clone. How many generations will these materials keep showing up? How systemic are they?
Well, that's something I can't answer yet. We're still trying to learn this. And one thing we're doing is that's one of the reasons we're working with SC Labs. We're doing more and more testing now that we have a platform where we could actually grow more plants and test more. We are actively doing that. The one way I know that cleans up plants and genetics is tissue culture, and that's another part of our business that we're going to expand into at the nursery as well. And
for example, the grape industry in California, they for wine, they supply rootstock, which is guaranteed virus free. It would be easy enough to do the same thing with cannabis, with systemics, poisons, and viruses, because even from seed you get viruses. Viruses can carry over in cannabis seed, so that's no guarantee that it's clean. It's clean from pesticides, but not from diseases.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, it's a good
absolutely.
Making.
Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for having me on. I'd love to be on again. This has been a really incredible experience and incredible panel you guys have had today. I do have some other obligations, so I'm gonna have to cut out.
And yeah, real quick, Brian. Yeah, if just in reference to that, I mean, I have such deep respect for kind of this, the teaming with microbe, kind of restoring the soil, kind of the microbiome in the soil approach towards prevention. And I've known Brian for a long time, back when I used to work in the hydroponic industry, and I feel very honored and blessed to be working with Vital and on this input review we're doing for this third-party farm certification program we're doing in Envirochem and Enviroorganic, because in this brave new world of pesticide regulations that are so tight, it's like it's just such a scary world of like, what products do I use? Because just 4 or 5 years ago, people were unknowingly using Bushmaster and Gravity, thinking it was derived from seaweed, and all these products, like Guardian, that's got pulled for having unlisted Avid in the product, and like the most recent Omri listed Azatrol, Omri listed Azadactrin kind of concentrate from Neem, which also turned out to have like 3 unlisted synthetic pyrethroids and pylon in it. It's like, it's just this mind-blowing reality. And there's the room for error of like a farmer knowing or having confidence in a product that's going to help them succeed, especially when they're trying to do the right thing and maintain the plant to the highest of its integrity. It's like looking to more and more to quality products that are vetted and actually going through some type of process to substantiate the product. I think is going to be so important, because people are it's like either drift is coming from from neighboring farms where people are at because they are in bad locations, and just there's so much chemi agriculture going on around them, or it's like using all these products in your closed loop kind of organic system that you don't necessarily know or should have the full trust in that they're organic, because oftentimes it's showing that they're turning out to be hot, or the different products that are sold. So yeah.
Brian, man, very nice to meet you. It was a pleasure. I hope to talk to you off air one of these days. Thank you for your work, man. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, everybody. And anyone could reach out. My email is brian@vitalgardensupply.com. I'd be stoked to connect with all you guys off air and just continue making cannabis industry cleaner and better.
Do you have an Instagram that you want to share?
Yeah, Vital Garden Supply, or at Vital Garden Supply. We are active, always putting different things that we're doing up, and work with a lot of great people in the cannabis industry. Super stoked on Alec and SC Labs, and Tony's been doing incredible work, and Bubble Man, we've been using your product since as far back as I can remember.
Right on, bro.
Using way more insect frass.
And thank you for being a leader and leading by example, because others around you will see what you're doing and will want to replicate it in other counties too. So great job, SC, and great job, Vital. And Brian, much love, buddy. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, we'll talk soon, Mark. Take care.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming in. Very good, very good. Wow, we went solid there for a couple of hours, got pretty deep. I like the conversation. I did just end up sending the link out to Forrest, who may or may not make it in. He was watching, said the panel was wonderful and it was inspiring him. He's kind of a big part of the underlining conversation, really, of all of that we're talking about, because really, let's be honest, where do we all want to align ourselves? With the highest of integrity, with no poisons, with things that aren't even questionable in any way, because to do no harm, right? That's our Hippocratic oath. It's like the cannabis community, really, this core group right here, I believe, wants to do no harm. And there's so many different aspects of the community that we cover with each little box that's currently residing in here, right from the roots right up to the resin heads. And I love it.
Let's give a shout out.
Sentiment.
I want to give a shout out to Greece for legalizing medical cannabis, and also to Spain for Catalonia, for the Barcelona area, for legalizing consumption, cultivation, and distribution.
Wow.
Etienne,
yeah, that's great.
Etienne, did you know that in the 1920s, Greece was the largest hashish producer for Europe?
I had no idea, but I would have. Wow, it must have been pretty good hash. Greece hash.
I'd like to give a shout out to Greece for Saganaki flaming cheese. It's the best appetizer ever. When they light the cheese right next to your table and they bring it to you, it's awesome. It's like doing dabs of cheese. It's the best appetizer.
Oh, cheese dabs. I definitely see a Hulk meme coming up. Oh, man. Hulk, do cheese dabs.
Hulk love fondue.
I've collected about several hundred different Lebanese cloth bags that were used for hashish, because that's the way the Lebanese produced it, in like a linen cloth bag.
Oh, do you have any? Do you have any to show us?
I can go get some in the other room.
Yeah,
Yes.
just a couple hundred, Etienne.
Yeah, no, just one. I just wanted to see, because
what I was trying to say was, I wish I had one from the 20s and before, when Lebanon was doing the exact same thing in linen bags.
Yeah, I've seen some of your linen bags, and every time you've allowed me to look at them and touch them, I'm always like, this is so cool. Like, what a unique part of the history.
I've heard, but never seen. Even when I scored Lebanese, it came in that very thick filmed cellophane. It wasn't in something like that. But yeah, that they're even around or collectible, and that he, of course, has hundreds of them.
I know. I have most of the ones that exist on the planet currently in one spot.
Hey, I was about to say, he's got the corner of the world supply.
Just in the other room. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I'd like to make a suggestion to Alec. This is just an idea for when you see samples come by that are hot with pesticides. Wouldn't it be really cool? You know, they sell these little pack cartridges with silica gel, and what you can do is basically do just a quick flash filtration of that sample through the silica gel. And, you know, when you give the customer their bad news that their sample is contaminated, you also can give them good news that they can basically flash that shit through silica gel, basically remove the contamination and make it, you know, good medicine again.
Is that possible? You're saying that's a successful like pesticide removal process?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, most of the pesticides, at least again, the azoles will get hung up on silicon. If they're there in just trace amounts, I imagine that, again, I was thinking, I'm really intrigued about this hexane extraction of CBD, but if you were to take a non-polar medium and basically run that through silica gel, your pesticide contamination should be polar enough that it gets hung up on the silica gel where the extract and all the non-polar components and the cannabinoids and shit come through. And so now you're providing your customer, again, with the bad news that their shit is coming back contaminated, but good news that they could basically just flash the shit through a column of silica gel and basically clean it up and then resubmit it and then see if it actually, you know, does.
So here's a question though. When you say clean that up and say you're doing it regularly and you're getting this, what I would suppose is some toxic waste or something that is very bad that you don't want to, like, what do you do with that stuff? What are people doing?
It just gets hung up on the silica gel, right? And it just, yeah, basically gets.
But where does the silica gel go? Do you throw it into a landfill?
Yeah,
like, does it go into the ocean? Does it like, I don't understand.
You sell it to the Jello company, and they start putting it in Jello along with the cow hooves.
Yeah, and
you know, we use a silica gel filter right underneath the main chamber in our extractor to sequester the insecticides. But those gel filters come in a package that says that when you're done with it, you can put it back in the package and dispose of it at a place where they take stuff like that. So it's not like you're gonna put it in Jello or pudding or send it to Bill Cosby. You know,
well, at least getting it out of your concentrate. You're getting out of the concentrate, and at that point, I mean, again, they can be incinerated where they get completely burned and, you know, turned into CO2 for the atmosphere. But, you know, whatever. I mean, I'm not saying that we have that problem solved. I'm just saying that if, you know, again, I always look at those, you know, decisions where vendors are looking to either, you know, buy a whole lot of material and then, you know, they're like having kind of like what Tony was saying, somewhat of an interview with the grower or with the supplier to understand, you know, that the stuff is pesticide free. Even if they do see results, maybe they got results on one bag, but they're buying 20 bags. How do they know that the result from the one bag is representative? Especially if you're talking about microbiological contamination, which is a whole different issue. But I was just referring to pesticide contamination in particular, which is that, again, you can sample one part of the plant that has pesticide contamination, other parts of that same plant could be completely made. So how you sample a large batch of material to get a representative sample. So when you're looking to make, a purchase of, a lot of material, that you could actually have a reasonable, idea that that material is not contaminated. But again, I'll go back to one last thing and then I'll shut up, which is when you're looking at the PPB level, the part per billion level, holy shit, you're going to find fucking everything, dude. You're going to find Viagra. You're going to find cocaine. You're going to find everything that's ubiquitous in our environment at that level, which unfortunately is all kinds of
Are
shit.
you saying that cocaine and Viagra are ubiquitous in your environment, Mark?
All I know is that I have
It depends on the region or the municipal water supply you're dipping from.
Ah.
I have a friend who's got a triple quad mass spec that you can roll out any large bill in front of that triple quad, and it's got a sniffer that will find cocaine on just about any bill that comes from anyone's pocket, no matter if it was used for coke or not.
That's what she said.
When you're looking at part per billion level, again, you're finding things that are really, ubiquitous within our environment. Alec, don't you agree? I mean, part per million is one thing, right? Does everyone understand when we say part per billion so there's percent, right? That's part per 100. Then there's part per 1,000, right? That's even small. Then there's part per million. Now we're talking part per billion, man. That's just very, very, that's small. That's like a one shot of vermouth inside a railroad car full of gin in terms of a dry martini. So, I mean, the fact is that the dilution of these things in the environment and the sensitivity of these instruments, I mean, again, can you run Whole Foods produce through the same level of scrutiny and not find trace amounts of some of these insecticides and plant growth regulators part per billion level?
I think you bring up a really interesting conundrum, they kind of reminds me, if you're familiar with Michael Pollan's work, Botany of Desire, in Botany of Desire, he takes these, 4 crops, cannabis, tulips,
potato. Several Hash Church episodes.
Awesome.
Like about 10 episodes of Hash Church, it always comes back.
Oh, it's amazing. It's so amazing. And it gives me such future hope for humanity, honestly, beyond all the political bullshit of this, just the whole coevolution thing and how much, who's really in the driver's seat, how much effect is this kind of cannabis plant having effect on our personal cultural evolution and the industries that are being created from it, and the awareness that's being, kind of brought up, to everybody that's, working with this plant, and it's fascinating because in Botany of Desire, he believes the future hope, his future hope for, kind of the coming, kind of global food commodity market and kind of the shifting to this slow food movement, farm fresh, local produce model. In so many ways, kind of gives props to the cannabis farmers because of how intensively we focused on how to perfect growing this plant optimally for the most resin, for all these things, and doing it organically without any pesticides, all this stuff, and regulations. It's really interesting because it's regulations around cannabis, specifically on pesticides. I almost think it's like the cannabis plant is almost going to shake a lot of people that aren't really in line with the integrity of its message off, real quickly, because it's like, so many people coming in with so much money think they're going to come and just crush it, and buy all these, old cut flower greenhouses that have so dirty soil. My point is the pesticide regulations in cannabis, I think, are going to expose the dirty secret about how ubiquitous pesticides are in our environment, and how, a zero is almost a really difficult thing to ever produce again because of how much spraying and how much contamination is taking place, and I'm really hoping deeply that, kind of the ethics of the leaders in the cannabis movement and in kind of dedicating and doubling down to that, knowing the farmer and, anti-monocrop, kind of being able to kind of have, tighter understandings and controls over the supply chain management of where you're getting bud that's making products that you're trying to put under your brand. I think it's the biggest topic in the industry, I think. And I think it's going to, in so many ways highlight, you know, in the global agricultural movement, it's going to bring up the pesticide issue into people's consciousness, and hopefully in some bit of a way it really does begin to, you know, shift or accelerate kind of just the, you know, awareness around slow food movement, and, you know, kind of, yeah. I mean,
we supply a lot of our product to multiple sustainable agriculture consultants in the conventionally produced commodity industry, where they're growing tomatoes and stuff like that. And one of the larger clients that some of my guys sell to is, well, these are independent distributors that are selling to large agricultural operations. One of the things that some of these larger producers are doing is they're actually using systemic fungicides once per week, whether the crop needs it or not. Like on tomatoes, they'll go ahead and put down, so, you know, we're privy to some of these protocols that these guys are doing. And so what'll end up happening is they use contact fungicides, but they're also using systemics once a week, again, whether the plant needs it or not.
it's horrifying.
Well, what
systemics? Do you know what they're using exactly?
Yeah, I do. I know all of them. There's a multitude. There's quite a few. But rather than get into the details of the actual chemical compounds, which I think will bore people, I think this will kind of be more of interest. So the systemics, what they're doing is they're actually encumbering the vascular system of the tomato. So if you go into, you know, a major retail store and you see a tomato that's grown there, like back when we were kids, you would see those little brown spots that the tomato would get. And now those little brown spots that the tomato get, which was botrytis, the tomatoes don't get those anymore, because again, they're using a proactive approach. Now, those systemic fungicides, again, we're talking about micro doses. So think about this systemic fungicide that's going into a tomato on a part per million basis. So that systemic is actually killing all of, it's working as a biocide. So it's killing all of the bacteria, good and bad.
Yeah. Well, wait. So now,
like antibiotic.
Yeah. What chemical are you talking about exactly?
So on a parts per basis, what's happening is when you eat, you know, a fruit or a vegetable, what could happen, and again, this is being disclosed to me. I'm not saying this is fact or truth, but that systemic fungicide that is penetrating the entire vascular system of that tomato is working as like an antibiotic within our microbiome and our digestive diseases. For digestive, this is what's being told to me. It's
horrifying.
It's not something that I'm disclosing on the basis of our company. This is just what some of our sustainable agriculture consultants have disclosed to me. I just want to get that straight. So you think about the rise in gluten intolerance. You think about the rise
100%.
In celiac disease. You
autoimmune conditions, period.
Crohn's disease. So you think about the fact that possibly a fungicide that's designed to kill bacteria is in
a fungicide is designed to kill fungus. A bactericide is designed to kill bacteria.
Right. Okay.
And they're not necessarily in the same bucket. Antimicrobials in general, there are broad classes of antimicrobials. Some kill fungus, some kill bugs, some kill both, some kill one to kill the other, because it creates a biofilm, and the biofilm becomes basically a zoo for a whole diverse population of new microbes that basically colonize the people who came in there before them. So and I'm really interested in what you're telling me. So what you're telling me is that, and again, I'm somewhat of an expert in this field of antimicrobials, so I want to make sure you're not being bullshitted, which is that systemic fungicides are put into the plant not to kill bacteria, it's to kill fungus, right? And so the systemic fungicides that I know that are used basically control fungi on the plant and in the soil, but are very, very short-lived. You know, they're not there for a whole long period of time. What you're telling me is that there are things that are being applied to tomatoes that are persistent.
This is what was disclosed to me, Mark. But I'll tell you,
what is the active ingredient? I'm just curious, because that active ingredient must be registered for human consumption, because if it's persistent in tomatoes, That means you can eat a tomato that has some level of this stuff in. That means that some company registered a whole bunch of products based on some safety data that said that a whole bunch of human beings can eat this shit with this level of this stuff in these tomatoes, or else it wouldn't be on the U.S. market, right? That's supposedly what the environmental.
Well, are those limits?
Well, again,
are those,
protection
you're probably
to do.
right.
Okay.
You're probably right. But what this gentleman told me, and I'm not publicly disclosing it on behalf of our company.
Okay. Sure.
I'm just being told that these biocides, right? This is what I was told. These biocides can actually eliminate a lot of the bacteria as well. So they work as a biocide, not necessarily just a fungicide. So they're destroying all of the bacteria like you know, an antibiotic would, essentially.
Yeah. So
and
broad spectrum, and again, broad spectrum, and so antimicrobial, if it's a biocide, you know, it's definitely something that they're not being specific on whether it's a fungicide. Most biocides, there are certain, again, ones that basically have no activity against fungi at all. Fungi have their own, you know, they got their own fucking kingdom, I think, right? They do. They have their own kingdom.
well, and
Right.
Yeah.
you know, and
I was just going to add one thing. I mean, there's a whole lot of chemicals that are used in the production of food and processed food and produce. But what makes it registered today is not necessarily, you know, chemicals that kill bugs. There's a lot of chemicals that kill bugs. What makes a crop protection agent registered today is the fact that it has a really good safety profile, is that it's got no mammalian toxicity. So a lot of the mode of actions of new low use rate agrochemicals are based on specific action that are specific to insects. So like calcium channeling and potassium channels, there's specific mechanisms in insects that don't exist in humans, so they can develop essentially, you know, medicines, if you will, just to basically knock those out. But let me just finish this last thought. So the point is that those are used in foods today. Somewhere a long time ago, or maybe not so long ago, a company spent a whole lot of money in doing safety and assessment studies to get that stuff registered for that end use. And again, here in Canada,
public bias.
Yeah, we're faced with the conundrum that there is no safety assessment for any of these products being applied to cannabis, because no company was forced to do that to register the active ingredients so they can sell products. And it looks like the dipshit that Trump put in there is going to basically keep companies from being able to register stuff with the EPA, which is completely fucking stupid. And thank you, Trump voters. And the thing is that, you know, there are biological ways of controlling plant disease that can aid cannabis cultivation. So this is really the EPA taking 2 steps backwards and not registering those products.
You know,
all right.
Biocontrol agents. There's Activate, Serenade. There's those products, and I've heard that they work great.
Regalia, Grandivo.
No, I don't know. Yeah.
Did you read the letter, Peter? Did you read the letter that Scott Pruitt wrote on this? It's just so shallow and so thin. It's just, oh, you know, we can't. The EPA can't do this because cannabis is illegal, and it's just a fucking bullshit letter. But anyway,
actually, all this talk of pesticides is a bit of a downer. I mean, we do need to have safety standards. We do need to produce clean, safe cannabis. But I did find some Lebanese hash
what that
bags.
letter shows, Sam, is that, oh, I'm sorry. What that letter shows is that, you know, they're not taking a step forward in letting.
I agree with you, Mark. I read the letter.
Yeah, it sucks. Go ahead. Show us your show and tell now.
Okay. So this is a red Lebanese. Can you see it?
Looks green.
Yeah, see the red with the triple X.
It's green, as a matter of fact.
They're messing with us.
And
oh yeah.
I'm afraid the light is very poor
Oh, it's pretty good. It's not that bad. I can kind of see.
This
It
one
looks
is
really beautiful.
This one is for the kids.
Yeah.
Oh God, you're funny.
That's
dude.
called Kitty Hash.
Oh my God, Sam. Such a character. No, I agree, Sam. It is. I mean, it's definitely, especially with the level of the people that are in here right now. Even Brian, who just left, a lot of the people, really, most of us here are at the point where we much prefer to just have product, not have to become sick and have these poisons used on them, but a product that could be bred specifically for strength and for resilience, used with, you know, like proper root symbiosis and living soils and teas and organics. And I mean, that's what I would like to see. I just want to see the plant in the most natural of ways be boosted to express its terpene and cannabinoid profile to, you know, back to the 10, because I really feel like we're living in the age of the 7 right now, where everyone thinks a 7 is like a 9.5, and it's not.
That's what you have with soil balance. Oh man, we really do. The soil balance will return things to that balance, and I'm excited for all your plans. Yeah.
I was just going to add, think about what Alex said, though. This is totally fucking cool. This whole pesticide issue, which they want to have, you know, cannabis with 0 pesticides, 0. I mean, this is rising to the level of awareness where people are beginning to think about how this affects their food. And so that's like, you know, hey, how, you know, is the food that I'm, you know, eating raised? You know, is this botrytis, you know, free tomato the safest thing I could be eating?
So,
you know,
I've got whole bags from Lebanon. Plus, I have where I just cut out the design on a bunch of bags.
Nice.
Hey, Sam, are those hemp? Is that woven
No,
out of
no, these are probably either cotton or linen.
Nice.
I like
so
the
cool.
lady with the big rifle that you could tell by just how she was drawn.
AK-47 pick, yeah.
Yeah, she's that's definitely what's from the 70s or something like that.
Something like that, yes. I also have two horses brand, and there's Christian ones and there's Muslim ones, because they were both in the hash trade.
That's awesome, dude. I mean, what a cool
Healer of the
history.
nations.
Right? Beautiful.
Great collection of
I even
history
have
there. Sam.
one paper one.
Oh, the paper one. Look at that. What does that say? Miss Normal Hashish?
Mrs. Normal. Yeah, I think it does.
That's awesome.
Guaranteed Mrs. Normal.
Hey, welcome, Forrest.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
You know, we've been talking
Good to
about all
see you.
sorts of things. All sorts of things.
Yeah, I've got to step in and listen to some of that. I was really glad to hear the systemic pesticide discussion. Wanted to send you that message and tell you thanks, but thanks for the invite. Come on.
Yeah, you know, no matter how safe we think they are, let's probably not put them into everything we eat and inhale into our lungs.
Right.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. You know, I don't know if it got brought up or not, but we had 40% of our medicines, once we made concentrates, 40% of them failed for mycobutanol from organic farms. So I've been really making a big issue about this, and I haven't heard it talked much anywhere, which is why I love this show. Good job.
What was the
Well,
level?
and especially with Eagle 20, one of the really trippy parts is, you know, since it's at such a similar boiling point as cannabinoids, when it's distilled, it's so common, concentrated absolutely with cannabinoids. Also, you know, as opposed to other things that might not be.
What I really wonder, if we're talking about systemic fungicides, is and maybe Mark would know about this, but are they selective? You know, when you're talking about the diminishing titters of fungi within the plant's vascular system, is that particular synthetic capable of being selective in what it kills? I mean, are you sure, Mark, that these products, and you've studied them, great, but do they?
I'm not sure at all. I tell you,
bacteria created it.
Well, but I think it's safe to say that I think it's safe to say though that the green revolution model of monocrop super chemi agriculture with dumping pesticides disproportionately on your plants, without any regard, has obviously led to such incredible loss of soil microbiome, and so I mean I think it might be all things combined. Right, and because if you kill off the fungus in the soil and you allow an environment for certain bacterial colonies to grow disproportionately, and you lose your balance of protozoa, nematodes, bacteria to fungus, you all of a sudden you significantly throw off the soil food web, and then and when you're just continuously dumping like whatever chemicals, I mean, it seems like they're obviously. I mean, have you heard about the Indian farmers that have killed themselves drinking Monsanto fertilizers over the last 10 years by the 100,000s, because of how quickly like the soil erosion happened and, like their, loss of natural soil. You guys heard anything about that?
Yeah, totally. But Forrest,
they think they have no future anymore, so they drink the insecticide themselves because it's the cheapest way out.
And also because they become almost indentured servitudes to big ag, in like, the loans that they then get so far behind on that they can't even ever pay back and have to use increased, kind of chemical fertilizers that they then have to buy just to get the same sustained yields because their soil's dead now. And so
in the end, what Monsanto and the other companies are doing there is they do make them into indentured servants at first, but then later they actually try to get a hold of the land, and they can run these guys off of their land because of the way the laws and financial responsibility work in India.
Well, that's why I think that the regulations on cannabis pesticide use are going to be, actually so good for the plant's survival and for the survival of all the mom and pop small scale farmers that have been doing this all their life, because it's so hard to grow, especially on scale, really amazing quality cannabis, super terped up, that's clean without pesticides. And if you haven't like gotten smashed by broad mites or rustids, or like don't know how to deal with identifying all these different plant pathogens or plant pests that are invasive, it's like the room for error where you can like not know how to diagnose it and just bomb shit with like the triad of eagle, forbid, and floramite, those days are gone. And I think the margin for error in not knowing how to have a really strong integrated pest management program, is going away real quick. So it's like, I think the people that have figured it out are going to be super successful while a lot of people fail, because a lot of people are throwing huge money in building the most sophisticated build outs, thinking that they're just going to crush and become like the biggest cannabis millionaires ever. But it's like, it's interesting because it's like, this is very different playing field, because the pesticide thing is like, I think it'll be one of the single dividing factors in who makes it and who doesn't.
Yeah, but you got to admit, if you look at the food supply in America, the vast majority of it is not organic.
Is that good though?
Pesticides on it.
No, right, but that's also why on like oncology doctors and like autism specialists like always first and foremost get parents to to choose organic foods and produce for their kids, because of the presence of all these random endocrine disrupting different types of like kind of gnarly kind of neuro toxic pesticides, and then also like considering like imidacloprid, imidacloprid neonicotinoid pesticide is one of the most frequently used, common, accepted, acknowledged pesticides on most produce nationally, but it's also one of the biggest contributors to the colony collapse disorder and the mass bee die-off that's happening. And which is one of the biggest reasons why California went so kind of regulated. Even though imidacloprid's regulated for use on tobacco, it's not going to be for cannabis. And in California they went super strict on it, especially because of like how much California's trying to remove neonicotinoids from kind of the supply chain, or just from the agricultural use, so it's like, there's so many pesticides approved by the EPA, but does that actually mean that we're not getting harmed or chronically from the exposure to all these different whatever chemicals we introduce to our bodies every day?
I honestly don't think the average American gives a fuck. I mean, why do they eat it?
We do, though.
And why do they buy all their food from places that are manufacturing with pesticides because
Also,
they give a buck. They like the cheap prices.
Economics. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But also, it's hopefully that there's this very interesting kind of what's it, oxymoron, or I don't know if that's even the right word, but you have so many people buying $100 grams of extract and just trolling people relentlessly on Instagram about having dirty product for like residual butane or pesticides, even though they're going to McDonald's and eating a Big Mac after that
3 times a day.
3 times a day. So there's obviously a disconnect there, but I think hopefully this educates, makes us aware, and pushes us to change our ways.
What's the old meme about the hippie girl at the fish show or the dead show who only eats organic and vegan, but is taking the mystery liquid in the parking lot?
It's won't drink cow's milk, take acid from strangers.
Well, LSD is medicine, though.
It is, but it's still a funny meme.
That's a joke, yeah. So someone asked how much that I happen to have a recent stack of test results here, and for those of you out there, if you want to have clean and do clean medicine, that's what it takes, is testing everything over and over again. So I just went through this real quickly to see if I had any fails in this stack that I have here of recent tests, probably about 30 or 40 tests, and I pulled out 3 that came up really quick from organic farms. So with the let's see, this one's got mycobutanol 2.1 parts per million.
This is a lot.
Carbaryl, 20.3 parts per million. I don't even, how do you say this one? Tabucazole?
Yeah, that's a triazole.
Tebuconazole.
There you go. Thank you. That's why we got experts on the show.
Another trial fungicide.
That's 0.2 parts per million. So that one popped up quite a bit from an organic farm, apparently. So Carbaryl is a big problem. That one pops up quite a bit. But
if I'm not mistaken, isn't that like an organophosphate that's used in ag?
That's right. Yep. Yeah. So at those levels, would you think that could still be not coming from a foliar application, and it could be coming from, say, like a mulch or a not a mulch. What were we talking about before?
Dirty inputs, yeah, hot inputs.
Yeah, like dirty soil. Could this be a dirty soil or a drift, and not necessarily, hey, I never applied that material to my plants at all?
Well, some of these folks, sorry, not to jump in, but just with our organization, because we're dealing with such fragile and small children, we don't just take whatever somebody wants to donate. We try to get to know these people, and some of these folks I know. It's an uncomfortable situation. I'm sure that Tony's had this as well, or some of you have, when you have to go back and say, hey, sorry, we had to destroy this or not use it. And they get pretty upset because people put their life's work and passion into this. So I know some of these people are not intentionally contaminating, so
I was personally the guy. I was kind of like the Grinch of Chalice, because part of my job was to basically contact the 79 disqualified entrants that had pesticides in their products, and I was basically letting them know that they were disqualified because of these detected pesticides. And so people are super pissed. But it's like one of the big things I was focusing on, like with all these people I was talking to, is I was like, man, I mean, this is honestly, although you lost $500 per entry, entry fee, it's such a small price to pay to figure this out right now, where you still have a few months to fucking get way ahead of it. Because if you don't, you're done. And it's like it's almost too late to figure it out. It's like if you're finding out right now that you've never cleaned out your closed loop system, and you're sourcing from all these farms, running all this material, and you have pesticides in the same concentrations across the 10 samples that were entered. It's like that's such clear cross contamination in your extraction machine or in your gas. And and so just people coming to aware of this right now, it's like a small price to pay to get publicly humiliated in this, in one of these, events and competitions, because 6 months from now it's a $250,000 product recall or a liability lawsuit.
Yeah.
You don't test your race car on race day, okay? You don't, right? Okay. You don't test your car.
Also, too, some of these really persistent and systemic insecticides, pesticides, fungicides, they get into the soil and they persist there for quite a while.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And because it's like, if a foliar application is applied and then UV from the sun is the biggest thing breaking down the systemic residue, what happens when you're root drenching imidacloprid or root drenching any of these other compounds? Because what is the half-life or the residue effect there? I would totally agree. That's probably substantially longer.
Is the biology. If you have good biology in the soil, they'll actually bind to a lot of the synthetic hydrocarbons that are in the soil and bind it to the soil, kind of like bioremediation. So they can.
The microbes will actually degrade some of these actives because, again, the actives aren't necessarily antimicrobial. Some of these insecticides, again, will have no activity on the microbes, and when the microbe sees that carbon, it's going to eat it like there's no tomorrow, as though it's sugar. So again, a lot of agrochemicals rely on microbial degradation to make sure that they're not persistent. Microbial, photolytic, hydrolytic, these are all the reactive handles that they put into these active ingredients so they don't persist in the environment like the old ones.
I just wanted to give a big shout out to the vegetarians out there. You folks do realize that all the white sugar produced, it goes through activated bone charcoal.
Nice,
man. First Jello and now this, huh? Oh, gosh.
But real quick, something I wanted to kind of share a story on. One of my really good friends, he grew for a long time in Santa Cruz. His family has a lot of pear orchards up, or massive acres of pear orchard up in northern Oregon, and he's an organic certified pear farm. But and so they dedicated to organic and such. They go up there, they get a tier 2+ license, whatever, and they have over 44,000 square feet of greenhouse going now. But they've run into a major problem, and that's that pretty much all the surrounding farms in that valley all are also pear orchards. Are not organic, and when they spray for pesticides, they basically have like a metal pipe grid kind of going around the entire orchard with like kind of holes kind of throughout that basically they charge the line and it just shoots like 20-30 feet into the air. This water kind of with diluted pesticide or fungicide in it, and there's all these rules for when these pesticides are allowed to be applied, like no wind, certain times of the day or night, et cetera, et cetera. But he's pretty much already had to threaten lawsuit to a lot of these neighboring farms in the valley, because of how regulated cannabis is, that they have to be notified with X amount of time so they can basically batter down the hatches of all their greenhouses in an attempt when they're spraying to like prevent any drift coming in their greenhouses. And, they've already, although not detected in the flower, once they made, kind of their product that's all organic and extract, they're seeing this consistent, like detectable level of like a fungicide called boscalid. Boscalid, it's one of the pesticides that Oregon and California have on their list, but it's a fungicide that's used on pears quite frequently. And so, just kind of, considering kind of how kind of drift travels, and when you don't have like positive displacement or kind of, what have you, it's like, is a lot of people, like when you think about, all these huge acquisitions of all these old kind of cut flower farm greenhouses throughout Monterey and Salinas, it's like, holy shit, it might be shown that a lot of areas can't grow herb that is in compliance with what the state requirements and the limits of pesticides are going to be.
At least in greenhouses, the pesticide is a bit contained. What's worse is when they're growing strawberries and other outdoor crops.
I was just going to mention that.
They use airplanes to spray those, and I guarantee you it drifts.
I was in the Central Coast in the 90s, and you know how they use the plastic on the strawberries? Well, they were using methyl bromide back then. Think about that. And
They still use it on grapes.
they were injecting the methyl bromide to strawberry fields that were in kind of a residential neighborhood. The wind came and blew that plastic tarp off for weed control that actually sustains the gas within the soil. The tarp came off, and they had to evacuate 4 blocks of houses.
Oh my God.
School because of this methyl bromide that was used on strawberries. So
yeah, I grew up in the Central Valley. I grew up in the Central Valley in California, and yeah, there's no containing that. Those crop dusts, we used to play as kids next to some of those fields, and because we rented houses there growing up, and I remember they'd start spraying, 20 yards before the field, and we would just get dosed in it. It's just a sloppy application, and it's really going to have a huge impact.
Do you think that dosage while you were as a kid had anything to do with what's going on with your kid now?
No, I think it's where I got my superpowers. Yeah, no, I have no idea. Nice. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, it's just, you just bathe in it.
I know. I used to follow the mosquito truck down my back lane while it was spraying Zyklon B.
Yeah, just playing in it. It's like, oh, they got me. Yay, kid.
I used to do the same thing following a mosquito truck when I lived in Florida.
Fuck.
I'd ride my bicycle. I like the smell.
Me too. I'd follow it on my bike too. Oh my God.
Some people like sniffing gasoline.
There you
go. Yeah.
That's fucked
I grew up in Okinawa, and the mosquito trucks drove around spraying DDT all the time. And as kids, we rode behind it in bicycles because it was the only mosquito-free zone we could find.
Oh, wow.
True story.
Damn. Well, we're all going to die.
I want to steer it back to how cannabis can flourish in scenarios where pesticide and fungicide isn't really needed. I really, this plant evolved without our interventions. Absolutely. And I really think there's a thing with soil biology and also identification of the types that grow in these different environments. And again, indoor and in greenhouses to an extent, you can create different environments. Outdoor, you're kind of limited. But this is an incredibly diverse gene pool that we've created at this point. And I really, it's been my experience, and I really want to push the idea that with the right cultivars and the right attention to the soil or the biology and whatever material you're growing in, including indoors and greenhouses, you can find plants that will give you what you're seeking and not have to get any applications of any of these things that we've been discussing today. And I'm really pushing this idea because, one, Alec was mentioning that small farms have an advantage here that large farms aren't going to be able to work with, because at a small farm, you can source your inputs yourself. You can control what your compost is like. You can control what your biology is like. You can make friends with your neighbors so that they're not spraying on your stuff. And it's been my experience, I'll say it like that, that I've had some success finding plants that flourish in the environment I can offer here. And I want to suggest to anyone that cares to explore the different plants that are out there, you can probably find something that's going to give you what you want in the environment you're working with, and you're going to find it's not going to need all of these things that we've been talking about. And when I find a plant that I really love and it isn't challenged by bugs or whatnot, insect frass is one of the routine supplements that I use in the soil.
Amazing.
But I also like certain plant-based amendments that I can use in the soil. I like comfrey, stinging nettle, and horsetail. Makes a tea that irritates bugs, but doesn't seem to really be a pesticide per se. And meantime, plants seem to be really stimulated and like it a lot. That's an example. One of the only foliar sprays that I use is water, especially adjusting the pH of water. And I've heard Mike, there's been discussion here about using electrolysis to do that. But Yeah, foliar spray of water really has remarkable effects.
When you spray water, is it at a specific time? Like, I mean, I know you don't really want to do it when the sun is high in the sky and burning hot.
Only if I'm indoors, it's right when the lights come on or just before. I don't like to do it as the lights go off. Outdoors, again, just following that same thing in the mornings when the stomata on the leaves open up. It's a real good time to give them some moisture, rinse the dust off. They'll take in some moisture there. That happens in nature. That's really the guiding principle about how I work with plants, is to try and understand what nature is like for those plants, where they come from, and then try and duplicate. Thank you. Yes, exactly. And I think because the genetic pool that we've created is so diverse, I really think that whatever conditions you're working with, you can find plants that will flourish in your scenario. And then all of a sudden, this conversations about various things to control pests or keep diseases in check are not so relevant. And this plant, it's incredible what this plant is capable of. I mean, every one of us has some aspect of deep respect for what this plant can do for us humans. And I really do think that we have evolved with this plant to benefit from it, and it has evolved to benefit us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mike Pollan definitely hints at that in his book, The Botany of Desire, and I'm in agreement with him. Like, what a great companion we have both been to one another, cannabis and humanity.
Yeah, it's like the dog of the plant world, right?
It sure is. It is a very successful plant.
Yeah, it's our companion. It's co-evolution.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and on the kind of teaming with microbes approach, yeah, I mean, you know, whenever you're looking to nature for a more efficient design, and you're able to, like, as close to potentially possible recreate that, you know, and you know, I know people that are having such amazing success, especially on kind of big scale kind of production, kind of, you know, working with and teaming with kind of predatory mites like Persimolis and Swarovski mites, and you know, and kind of just having this very methodical, never deviating from kind of preventative approach. You know, the whole ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. You know, and using different rotational horticultural oils and biofungicides and bioinsecticides and compost teas. It's like, I mean, it's just amazing, because it's like, that's, I mean, the leading possible potential way to grow a plant to maximize ability with, like, you know, maximized increases in secondary metabolite production. You know, it's just so funny and amazing that kind of, you know, cannabis farmers have figured out how to become if they choose the path, the best farmers there are possible. And so, yeah, I really hope and have a lot of faith that that's going to carry over, and, you know, hopefully empower through hemp production a lot of other, you know, or other farms who, you know, might have been growing GMO corn up to this point, you know, but hopefully, you know, it's the thing that is a catalyst to help shift to, you know, agricultural evolution.
Good luck with corn. 90% of it's GMO.
94.
The economic model that drives the cannabis industry right now is based on quality. Right now, our food is not that way. You know, most Americans right now don't give a shit about the nutrient density within the commodity that they're ingesting. They just
You're right. It's all about price.
Well, they're not even seeing the hypocrisy of what Alec just mentioned, spending days trolling people relentlessly for their dirty extracts while just consuming the lowest quality of food known to man.
We're talking about McDonald's. You're making me want to go get one.
Well, and you're also, you know, what's important here is the preventative, you know, so if you got clean certified genetics, you started to grow, and you took all of these best practices that's being discussed today between Wade and our buddy there, Kind Roots, with his product, would say you're doing everything you could possibly do to give the plant its most healthy environment and its best potential to be as strong as it can be. And it has exposure to UV in the sun in some capacity. It's going to naturally ward off pests and PM and things like that. So I mean, that's what the bottom line here is prevention and
Proactive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a systems approach, a systems approach
Yeah.
towards how you manage your
It's called
environment.
IPM, and
Yeah, exactly.
prevention is the key.
Yeah, and also considering too, it's really interesting because so often when I used to work in the hydroponic stores in Santa Cruz, kind of one of the most frequent things I would see happen is people would like essentially cut corners on build out or like dehumidification, say, and then like they'll go overboard and get the full 20 part kind of nutrient kind of PGRs, everything to almost overcompensate with their nutrients for a shitty environment or whatever. And 80% of your success in so many ways comes to the environment that's there that you created. And when you consider like light deprived herb, most people, and I think we talked about this on House Church before, but when you take a blackout tarp and you cover up like a row of plants that you're light depping, you create this micro. It's almost like putting a clone tray dome on to create 100% humidity. So for the whole night, you'll have this like shift in humidity to where it sits at 70 to 80% for the rest of the night. And that's like the perfect proliferative environment for these microbes and powdery mildew and such.
That's what exhaust fans are for. You can easily control humidity in a darkened greenhouse. I've done it for 30 years.
Right, but how many people? I mean, and I think it's a part of people's own evolution. It's like understanding how much the environment that you create is also one of the biggest things you could do to like prevent pests and pathology. Then using prevention like sprays from the time the plants are small to where you can get full plant coverage with neem or peppermint oil. By the time they're huge, you're just doing your weekly sprays, and even though you might not cover every underside and every top side of every single leaf, since you've been doing methodically every week since the plant was a baby, it's like you're pretty contained. But that's such a body of knowledge and work and dedication and devotion, and so many people like that are scaling 1,000%. It's like it's like they're it's hard to maintain a really integrity based IPM strategy whenever you're overextended or you don't have enough staff, because it's always been you can handle so much more canopy space with so many less employees because you spray these pesticides, but
and when you have an investor that's financing your operation and you need to protect your crop, and you have proven methodologies that are going to do exactly what you're talking about, Alec. So that's one of the caveats in this industry as well, the economics.
It definitely cost more to use IPM. I was the largest biological control person in Europe for years and years on cannabis.
And thank you very much for that, Sam.
Yeah, deep respect, Sam. Sam, I'm sorry, is hemp disease pest management? That's McPartland, correct?
Excuse me, what was that question? It's a little bit quiet.
Sorry, hemp disease pest management. Was that McPartland? Did you have a part of that to do with that work?
All of the practical suggestions were from me. John did research in libraries. Robert took photographs, and I wrote all the how to use the materials and what works and what doesn't, because I've got 40 years experience using IPM.
Deepest respect and props. That's still to this day is like the guideline textbook kind of in the subject. So thank you for your work.
My goal at that time was specifically to allow people to have alternatives to dangerous pesticides, insecticides, fungicides. And I hope it helped, but to be honest, people almost have to be driven into using IPM. It's not enough people have a good enough conscience, and they just not they prefer to save time, save money, and do it the easy way, which is nuke them with some sort of nasty shit.
Well, and also because usually whenever somebody's going into a hydro store too, it's like, even though the products you recommend is like, oh, you're in week 2 or 3 of flower, you actually shouldn't really spray anything. But if you are going to spray something, here are these organic products that you can spray if you spend 30 hours in your room just spray and coat every plant. But it's like, by the time so many people are coming into the hydro stores to try to find a solution, it's because they have a deep infestation, and by that point, it's too late. But you see people's like moral compass shift really quickly when they're faced with huge loss.
To be honest, the only thing I ever sprayed was bacteria thuringiensis, BT. I would do that in vegetative, but I never sprayed any things on my plants. No teas, none of this kind of crap. I biodynamically fertilized my soil in between crops, and the plants never seemed to need it. That and super heavy prevention. I was using at one time 22 different kinds of predators preventively. There was no problem. I was using them preventively, the majority.
Well, and that's, I think, what's so exciting about like the future of what we're talking about. It's like, with biodynamic farming and permaculture models and sustainable soil models of like regenerating topsoil, creating the most, rich, biodiverse, like microbial.
Does cannabis really fit? Does cannabis really fit into permaculture? It's an annual. It gets harvested every year.
I just mean more in the model of like, it's like using local source inputs and kind of acclimated kind of microbes that are, from your, then just covering all the bases and building the soil. Because I mean, whenever you have like all the necessary microbes in your soil, oftentimes they're both helping to find and transport all the nutrients needed and break down and kind of send around, but also kind of they're there as natural plant.
What I've also
it's like your stomach microbiome, and it's as for an immune system.
What I've also found in greenhouses is even if your soil is perfect, and I'm talking about the soil in the earth, not container soil, and you biodynamically enriched your soil for decades, pests will still take off if you introduce them into a greenhouse. You've created a perfect environment for pests in an enclosed greenhouse.
Interesting. Long drawn out pause. Everyone's taking a breath. Whew. All right.
Bong rip.
No, it's true. You made the environment safe for the plants, but it makes it safe for everything else.
As above,
Just a
so
little
below.
conversation for a second, so.
I'll take a bong rip with you, Etienne.
Thank you. Out of the bong you gave me.
Naturally co-evolved with particular micronutrients in nature, where we take them out of that natural environment and we put them in that.
Sorry, what?
I do find some plants are resistant to some pests and diseases, but unfortunately, most growers, although they might be looking for those, what they're really looking for is what's popular and what sells at the moment, to be honest.
Well, and I also think that from our last conversation, if you were able to express the different types of terpene profiles, like when we were talking about having all 9 of them light up in equal
Right.
You were saying what that flavor and all that kind of stuff was for, but these plants also are responding to different environments and different areas when they're growing.
Right.
And terpenes can be repellents for different things, and they're using and expressing is like a language.
I wouldn't be surprised if some terpenes are attractant to some insects and fungus. And mildew.
Animals.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what they are. They're natural plant defense mechanisms, right? To like lure or to ward predators and lure pollinators.
Well, look what it does to us. It lures us in. It lures deer in. There's all kinds of animals. My little Pomeranian loves cannabis. If she can get to it, even if it's in an edible, zip-locked up, locked up in a backpack, put in a closet, if she can get to it and get her mouth into the backpack and open it, she'll hunt it down and find it. If you put her in your garden and we walk your greenhouse and you've got 2-foot plants, all the little lower leaves along our little path that we walked, she's going to nibble at them all along the way. She has no control over it.
Does she always have bobblehead?
Maybe her endocannabinoid system needs a little shot, Tony.
Tony should be happy he doesn't have a Great Dane like my sister.
Well, this is the other mystery thing I kept finding was I tried to keep everything away from her, And then I would come home and you could tell that she was getting high. And I was like, man, where is she getting all this stuff? I was like, I got no edibles. I got nothing. She's to the point where even the Q-tips that I clean out, just the little residual on the cords, and I put those down, she's been taking them out of the ashtray and has a little hash stash where she'll eat them. And it's like that intense.
Dude, think about it. You're like prohibition for your dog, but it didn't work on us and it won't work on her. She's gonna get her hash, she's gonna get her edibles, and nothing you can do.
So do dogs have an endocannabinoid system?
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yes.
Everything does.
Everything does not. Insects don't, but sea urchins do.
Yes.
Yeah, everything except for most insects.
Insects have receptors for the terpenes, though. How's that? How do you explain that?
Well, that may be true, but they don't have cannabinoid receptors, CB1 and CB2.
That's
I have a
correct.
dog that is a pretty reliable indicator for me of when I have a plant in the garden that's high in CBD and has virtually no THC. He will walk with me in the garden and with great respect reaches in and takes off sun leaves, usually gets 3 or 4 at a time. And every year he's been accurate that it turns out to be a plant that's high in CBD, low in THC.
That's pretty much fine.
I think when we get into specific medicines, this pertains to what Wade brought up as far as which environments do the plants express themselves most beneficially as far as not being susceptible to pests and other things. We're also going to find that they reach their fullest potential in certain terpene profiles in different environments differently because of what Tony mentioned, is they react to the environment that they're in. And so I'm really excited what some of these companies are doing as far as genetically mapping and doing scientific surveys of cultivators growing the same strains in different geographic environments, because in the next 5 years, we're going to be so much further ahead as far as understanding some of those manifestations of plants in different geographical areas. And as a medicine maker and someone who's got huge interest in that, how those plants interpret their environment and how that changes the terpene profiles and the levels of certain terpenes is very, very interesting. So it's really an exciting time.
Mostly it just modifies the profile. It doesn't create new terpenes because those are determined by having a terpene synthase for that particular terpene.
Right. But those different levels of those terpenes are
No,
very significant.
that's absolutely true because I grew an identical clone for 25 years. It was grown under 100,000 different conditions, and we used to GC analyze it, and the profile would alter slightly, depending on the environmental conditions, whether they were the most favorable or the least favorable.
Well, here's my guess on the whole thing.
The first thing I shared with regards
to people from the dog park
was a new study that came out with the Institute of Ecology in the Netherlands. So my first hash church, I talked to you guys about this, was they came out saying that the most widely spoken language on the planet is terpene. So what's happening is, and a couple of you had mentioned this, is that these terpenes are actually, a hydrocarbon lighter than air, so they're coming into our nasal passages, and so our biology is actually communicating with that plant's biology. So there's a whole nother physics dynamic happening with our biocommunication with the plants, as well as the energetic one. So when we're talking about terpene profiles,
everything
variations of them actually do. It's pretty comprehensive.
Like alien language.
Everything here fits in with everything else. And so when you take a look at the fact that we've got endocannabinoid systems, everything else does too. Must be that when the Syrians or the Dog Star people left us off here, they left us with a pot plant and said, look, we're going to call this a mono machine. It's actually marijuana, but this will sustain you until you get going.
So you believe the Space Brothers?
I got some beads.
That's as good as any other theory.
Hey, you spend enough time behind a mosquito truck, anything will make sense after a while.
Yeah, and let me tell you, both Wade and I have spent a fair amount of time behind the mosquito truck. What a great quote. If you spend enough time behind the mosquito trap.
There we go.
Oh my God. Tony's just shaking his head. I woke up for this.
But something I think that's really interesting too with, because I mean, the understanding that there's, this super complex endogenous cannabinoid system, and, with some of the understandings that, so many types of disease and disorder might be rooted in some type of endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome, and then kind of, some of Ethan Russo's new work with kind of the whole idea of cannabimimetics and, other types of plants beyond cannabis that, have endocannabinoid system stimulating effects. It's really interesting, this whole kind of brave new world of almost like compound pharmacy of these, blending of, cannabinoid terpenes from the cannabis plant with potentially other types of plants like echinacea and, kind of ashwagandha and, different things like probiotics, because, they have these different upregulating or different, endocannabinoid system stimulating aspects. But, one interesting one, and have you guys heard, if you know what copal is? Copal, it's this like smudge that's a sap from a tree. That's it's a smudge that's very commonly burned in like sacred ceremonies.
It's a Mayan incense.
Yeah, exactly. It's this incredibly distinct smell. But there's a certain like diterpene or something in copal which binds to CB1, which is what happens to THC. THC is a partial CB1, CB2 receptor agonist. And so binding to CB1 is what helps to give the psychoactive feeling and effects. Then modulated slightly by the different terpenes. But I wonder what to take some amount of like this copal terpene that binds to CB1 as well, and adding that into some type of preparation, is that going to slightly create new effects? But because there's these two similar, and
you have to be a little bit careful when you're vaporizing or combusting new terpenes that are not found in cannabis.
Right.
With cannabis, all the terpenes that are there, we have hundreds and hundreds of years of experience
and true.
Show that they don't cause major problems. When you start breathing in huge amounts of copal with THC, it may or may not cause problems. Although copal, since it's used in religious ceremonies, I doubt it.
Right, and it's so common, like kind of inhaled or just whatever. But interesting.
Well, we're running out of time here, but that could be a whole show about, the endocannabinoid system is unlocking what we've seen in other aspects of natural healing. Anecdotally, it's really pointing to how those things are interacting with the body. And if anyone who hasn't read the paper that was mentioned here, this Dr. Russo's new work on cannabinoids outside of cannabis, it's really interesting. And you just see
beyond cannabis.
Yeah, you just see this trail of things that we've known forever. Kava root is another one that he does a big piece on in there, and how they're building things that interact with the cannabinoid system. But we see, essential oil therapies. You have all these natural therapies that we didn't understand kind of why we saw the benefits they did. But then you start to look at what is in lavender and lanolin, and we see how they're interacting with receptors in the body. You start to understand. I think this endocannabinoid system is going to unlock, far more than just how cannabis interacts with the body. It really is the greatest discovery in medical science in generations. And it's funny how under promoted it still is to this day outside of certain.
Yeah, well, we're putting, it's only if you're interested in it, or what you pay attention to, you become conscious of. We're like so geeked out on it, and nobody else is, so that's why we're the leaders of like bringing so much of this information to Bay, But if, that also brings me to the John McPartland paper, Care and Feeding of the Endocannabinoid System. Because when you start to understand the endocannabinoid system is this like master regulator system that helps to bring about homeostasis among all our systems in our body, it's so crazy how somehow intuitively stoners and hippies had it right all along, because in the paper it shows like how certain, exercise, things and yoga and like, aerobic activity upregulate your CB1 and CB2 receptors, that what have you. It's like through kind of doing things like traditional Chinese medicine, complementary alternative medicine, things like acupuncture. There's all this research coming about how your endocannabinoid system is being stimulated in all these ways from it, and like eating probiotics and drinking like kombucha and sauerkraut juice. It's really funny how it all kind of comes back to show that, these alternative ways are actually kind of supportive of this like, balance in our life.
I would be surprised if there's not a bell curve when it comes to endocannabinoid deficiency, meaning that the other side of the bell curve is overstimulation of the endocannabinoid system, and from having too much anandamide or some of the other endocannabinoid, natural endocannabinoids. I wouldn't be surprised if there's disorders connected with the too much.
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, too much FAW, FAW, which is fatty acid hydrolase, which is one of the enzymes that breaks down anandamide, and I want to say MAGL is what breaks down 2-AG, but FAW they're finding in elevated levels in the guts of patients that have certain irritable bowel and gastrointestinal tract disorder conditions like Crohn's, IBS, colitis, what have you, and so it seems like there's some type of dysbiosis of your endocannabinoid system in the firing off too much of this
also with those same patients, they're finding out that one of the most effective therapies is hypnosis, which to me implies that they are creating the stress internally that is causing the disorder, rather than it being straight biochemically based.
That's awesome, because that also gonna then gets into that new Martin Lee and Adrian DeVetley paper that they wrote on they put through Project CBD. It's called Mind Over Matter Over Mind, and it's amazing because it's all about these different mechanisms and actions of how the placebo effect and the nocebo effect, or the belief that some medicine or treatment is going to work, or a belief that medicine is not going to work, in so many ways is also regulated specifically by endocannabinoid system function and tone.
Exciting. We got another topic for the next show.
Yeah,
hey,
I would say
I've got to
the endocannabinoid system is what changed cannabis science. Yeah. Then after that, a few years later, they discovered anandamide. But it was the endocannabinoid discovery, I think in '88, that changed it. It was announced at the ICRS meeting I attended.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Mashulam.
Tribute to all the brilliant people.
It was
Alan Hallett.
Alan Hallett, that's right.
Who did that, correct.
Yeah. Hey, before I go, I want to thank everybody in Hash Church. And the last time I was on here, we were talking about the Collagerous Network, and people started throwing donations in there. And I just want to take a second to thank everybody who's watching who did that. I sent I think I sent the receipts to Marcus or what we ended up getting, but we were able to get the child-proof lids we needed, a bunch of bottles for kids, a lot of just the logistic things, the jars, and we were able to get what we needed for most of the year because of the help from the Hash Church community that didn't have to come out of my family's pocket and our volunteers where we normally try to chip in and get these out to the kids. So I just want to take a second to thank you guys so much and let you know how much of an impact that had literally on the lives of the kids that we're working with. So much love to you guys out there. It's very much appreciated. Much love.
Yeah, awesome, man. That was very nice of everyone to. That was almost $700 that everyone kicked down, and I made sure that I got it all to Forrest, and I trust 100% that he's doing the good work with it. So it was a nice episode to be able to make that happen for sure.
Yeah, man, that helps. It's big.
I think the Lebanese were decades ahead of us. You saw that bag I had of kitty hash. That was for people like you.
Right. It was the children hash. It's the hash for the children. Sam's always got to say the one quote they'll take from, there was a guy on there promoting hash for. Our prime minister is constantly trying to protect the children from cannabis. So right. I'm not quite sure if he understands exactly how safe cannabis is, but maybe one day. Maybe one day. More work to be done.
Well, thanks again, Forrest, for what you do and what you're doing. People see it and we understood, and those pictures struck a lot of souls. And thank you for just doing what you do and keep at it.
Well, hey, it's really touching lives and touching hearts everywhere. And I want to come on here maybe in a few weeks or when the time is right to talk about huge strides we've had here in California and huge progress we've had with the state legislature that is going to be changing the laws in California to help make what we're doing and help kind of shift how the cannabis industry looks at charity and opportunities businesses have to participate in it. So we're making huge strides. I couldn't do it without everybody's support. And what's really exciting is I think we're going to start something out of this effort here that hasn't been done, that once we get the laws written appropriately can be adopted nationwide and hopefully be a model internationally for people to pick up and take on and just allow this industry to do what it has the potential to do, which is thrive and, more importantly, create and spread healing throughout the world. And just, we're going to keep working at it. We're going to keep chipping away at it. But yeah, I want to come on here and when that gets closer to where we can talk about it publicly and share with everybody what we're doing. So it's really exciting.
I'll work on a new joke. I'm trying to figure out a good one with your name, Forrest.
Man, there's a lot. The trick is trying to come up with an original one.
Yeah,
I've had it my whole life.
Something along the lines of you can't see the forest for all the trees.
Yeah, I've heard them all. But yeah, you keep working on it. I'll let you know. We'll rate them.
You've had to lumber through many of them, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it builds character, right? Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I got to take off.
Run, Forrest, run.
Yeah, so you're not even close to original. I still get that. My favorite thing to do, though, is when I get that from people on the phone, is to just pretend like I've never heard of it. You know, like, what is that from? Like, it's this movie. You haven't heard of it? I'm like, no, man, what the hell are you talking about? So not only do they feel original, but then they're blown away that I've never heard of this movie.
Nice. Flip it around on
it.
At the very end, what you have to say to them is, life is like a chocolate.
How about for the rest of us?
Oh, that's good. That's
good.
Bad.
That's not bad.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Okay.
It's up there with about the standard quality of cannabis that I seem to see these days. We need to bump that 6 up to a 10.
Yeah. We're just gonna, put a little effort into it there.
Well, you know what? It's not even a little effort, because I'm looking now and realizing that it's like expertise on all levels. It's like deciding to do a YouTube show because you have a little bit of content and you're like, oh, I'm going to do a YouTube channel. And all of a sudden you realize you have to start learning about sound and microphones, and you have to learn about editing and transitions, and you have to learn about all this other shit that you didn't even know existed. That's what I love about Hash Church, that people are specializing in their spaces, and when we can all get together, it really puts a beautiful picture from seed to resin head and even beyond to the testing and the consuming, which we all love to do. It's just it's awesome. It's a great thing.
To be able to be participating and share.
Oh, Tony's bounced.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks so much. I will talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Good to see you, Forrest.
Thanks, Forrest. Be safe out there.
Right on, guys.
Yeah, that's smart of Subcool. Subcool said, fuck that, and hired a sound man and an engineering guy. Well, it's true. That's awesome that Sub did that. I just unfortunately did not do that. Although one time when I filmed with Tony, he brought a sound guy. That was pretty awesome.
Speaking of sound, I do also think that another conversation, ultrasonic vibration and frequency for pest control is been explored all the way yet on a massive level, and also vibration in music itself and how that interacts on an emotional, spiritual level that translates through how our endocannabinoid system works in itself. So I think music unlocks quite a few different things in humans. And if you study the life of plants and the emotional projection that you could put in a plant, what I mean by that is, the vibe of, if you had two of the same plants growing in two different lab controlled environments, and in one environment, you came in with positive vibes, music, and spoke to the plant in a reassuring way and said, you're beautiful every day, and I really appreciate you. There's actually science behind that versus somebody coming in and screaming at the plant, cursing at the plant, saying, saying I hate you, and projecting that onto the plant. They feel it and they actually respond. And I do think
Tony?
that in the future, yes.
I just read last night where ultrasonic pest repellers seem to be, to research right now, stressing plants out big time when you have them on.
Okay. What about around the property though, in a strategic grid line?
I don't know. I just read where they did some research, and it looks like the plants were stressed by the constant nonstop ultrasonic sound.
It makes sense. I think I said it's in the early stages. I mean, I think that
finding the right
frequency and
binaural
sound,
beats, everything like that.
I think frequency and sound though has another ability to unlock a lot of things too. But
Are you familiar with cymatics?
yeah.
Yeah, you know, that kind of speaks to it a little bit. Yeah, just it's a fascinating subject, but I mean, without a doubt, like it's secret life of plants too. You know, like it's without a doubt.
I think
your intention and your prayers and your blessings, you know, that have a direct effect on the output.
Tony, when I was younger, like 18, 20 years old, I used to honestly believe that the vibes of the grower somehow affected the potency or quality of the cannabis. I don't believe that anymore, but
Can't hurt.
I know a lot of people who do believe it, and I just have never seen any scientific proof of it.
You know, I would say what's funny is there's a gentleman in Oregon who I would say is a testament to it working, and it's a breeder, a good friend of mine named Green Bodie, a gentleman named John, and he's in this whole kind of idea of like intentional horticulture, and he's kind of really deep down this like Buddhist Dharma philosophy path, and he's right now out kind of kicking with the Dalai Lama and his crew at this big teaching kind of situation over on the East Coast. But honestly, to this day, it's the best weed I've ever seen in my life from Oregon, and it's like space weed, and it's organic, and it's grown really simply. But that's an anecdote, but
and to me, like what you want is the right genetics and to grow it the right way. But I'm not sure whether the vibes of the farmer has any serious effect.
Well, when the vibes are conscious and raised and high integrity, and you're focused on much more of what's going on, like maybe not spraying poisons and maybe not doing things that would bring harm to others. I think from that
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is if everything is identical except for the mental attitude of the grower, but everything else is totally identical.
Well, are you familiar with that? Did that Dr. Emoto work with the like water drops?
Yeah, messages in the water.
Yes, that's a real thing for me.
Chakra.
That's a real thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, that's one of those. It's funny because as the moment you start talking about that around the more scientific minded people, it immediately kind of gets thrown out, for hippy dippy shit. But it's really interesting because I think cannabis is this power wisdom plant, conscious expanding kind of paradigm shifting, similar to a lot of these other plant entheogens that have been around for thousands of years. And I definitely I don't know, I don't know if it's romantic like hope, but so much of my hope for humanity lies within the wisdom of and the teachings of these power plants, shifting our awareness, shifting our consciousness, and helping us to live a more mindful based approach towards life and being kind. So hopefully.
Well, obviously we're getting there when you think about just the fact that how many people I've met over the years in the cannabis industry are truly like maybe not taking the best care of themselves in other aspects, but just so focused on the plant that they love that they want it to be the safest and the healthiest. And, like I'm not laughing at that hypocrisy because I'm sure I've lived it and I'm living my own hypocrisies as I speak. So I'm not trying to talk down on anyone, but it's in that experience, it's in that hypocrisy that you can learn to be from one side and to move over to the other side, the part that you weren't thinking about, the part that you weren't aware. And so people should welcome that hypocrisy. They shouldn't look down on it like it's the worst thing ever. Hypocrisy is the bridge that leads us from where we were to hopefully where we want to be.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Ignorance is just a state of being uninformed and an opportunity to learn if you're open to it and not cognitively dissonant.
Yeah. True. Did you have something you wanted to add, Wade? Oh, you're on mute.
I'm also technologically challenged.
That's okay. I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
Yeah, I got to sign off here pretty soon too. I want to just thank you for the invite, and anytime that it makes sense, I am thrilled to join this panel because, yeah, I really feel blessed by the perspectives, the different points of view that are being offered here. And some of you folks are people I've known of for years and never had a chance to meet with or talk to. And Marcus, I really want to bless you and thank you for putting together panels like this and doing it every day over and over. And I think it's really important that this information be available to more people. I'm really hoping that the Hash Church turns into a huge presence in the cannabis world, simply for the both the depth and the heartfeltness of belief in the plant and what it can do for us. And I really think for the world. It really is the healing of the people, to use a phrase. Yeah, just over and over again, I'm amazed at what I hear in these few times I've been with you guys. And it's very affirming to me to be in your company. Thank you.
To be really effective, we need to reach out. Within our own community, everything you're saying is true. If you're a cannabis convert already, it's all true. But the vast majority of the planet are not converted and are not cannabis friendly.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks again, guys, and blessings.
Thanks for coming in, Wade. We'll definitely have you in again.
I'll look forward to it, man. Ciao.
Right on, man. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Oh, such a great panel today. Good people, good conversation. I loved the way it started, the middle, throughout the end of the conversation. I love having us call each other on the information that we know and might not know. It's just, it is true. It's like Sam said, and one of the things I don't very often sort of request, which you'll hear me maybe in chat at least more and more so now. Listen, if you're watching and you want to help, you want to be a part of it, sharing the link to Hash Church is a good way to do that. If you can share it and get it out and help build the live audience, we'd love to get back up to 1,000 or even above and beyond that. And I'm going to try and make a nice, beautiful photograph each week where we'll have the Hash Church episode and maybe who's going to be some guests, and we'll be able to share that via Instagram as well. And that is definitely a way that you guys, the audience in chat, can do that. And I'll also make a point on putting up the link to Hash Church every Saturday, afternoon after I do my Wake and Bake show, and you'll be able to have a place to come and chat for the almost 24 hours prior to the show. So we'll make that happen. Epic. And Alec, thanks for coming in today, dude. It was awesome. I know you're a hard guy to get in, and you probably were in. When you said a few of the things you said today made me laugh so hard. Like you said something like something about the webbing in full web mode. Oh, if you're in full web mode. And then you also said, oh, I was the Grinch of Chalice this weekend. Which is so fucking funny, dude. Sorry you had to go through that, but thank you for doing it, bro. Like, thanks for doing the hard work.
Oh no, It's a blessing, dude. I'm so grateful, so blessed. It's such an amazing kind of opportunity.
You take a lot of shit, Alec, but I mean, in the end, you just defer to, hey, science is science. I didn't poo-poo your fucking reality. You poo-pooed your reality. Science just verified it and validated it. Sorry.
Right. I'm sure the reaction.
I got a couple fuck yous and hang up, but most people, it's amazing because like I've had this conversation so many times, and like I can in so many words help people deduce down to a specific space where they didn't think about the contamination coming from. And so it feels so I just feel so great, you know, to help people arrive at like a aha moment, you know, about a certain thing of the vulnerability in their business that they take such pride in. And so, yeah, it's just, I'm in service to the plants.
The honest truth is people have ignored this for decades.
Yep.
It's been going on with imported products that they were using poisonous sprays down in Mexico, and until it's publicly acknowledged and people are forced to admit their mistakes, they will not change.
Well, what a great way for them to be sort of forced to see it through the perspective of you know, critically ill and catastrophically ill, both adults and children, who these small amounts that might not seem to a healthy person's daily consumption to be that big of a deal. In fact, some of them are a great deal, and I'm sure some of them are probably accumulative in the body. I don't know the science behind it, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear that, you know, some of these things
absolutely are.
Yeah, which is terrible. Everyone should know, like, that should be the law. If you're consuming something that's accumulative in the body that tends to stick around for your lifetime, that seems kind of insane that there wouldn't be some sort of a little, maybe giant, huge label that actually has an audio button that you push and it screams at you.
Well, they do it now with cigarettes because they got sued for so long. Now it's basically like, hey, we just want to let you know that we've got 150 additives in this. There are 100 and something different addictive chemicals in it. It's more addictive than morphine. And every cigarette takes 30 minutes off your life. If you didn't hear that loud enough, we've got a website, commercials, truth campaigns. We're trying to tell you not to buy our product.
Macro photographs of cancerous lungs.
At least.
In Europe, on the packages of cigarettes, they have pictures of people who are all fucked up from cigarettes.
Yeah, but they give you the
smoke at your own risk.
They give you the warning labels.
Dude, that's fucked up.
They give you everything that you should know, just so you know. And by the way, they're $10 a pack.
Jesus,
what a racket!
It's unbelievable. It is truly an unbelievable racket. I don't even want to get too deep into that one because I'm hypersensitive to cigarettes. They make me very ill. I tend to turn green and throw up if I'm around large concentrations of them. And I've always felt like it's kind of the worst payback ever when you like turn on someone to this beautiful cannabis resin that you have. It's like, here, have this, you know, smoke a little bit of this and try it, see how you feel. And then they're just like, oh, that feels great. You don't mind if I light a cigarette, do you? Blow right in your face. I'm like, oh, I do now feel like a bag of shit.
Yeah, you and I are very similar. If somebody starts smoking a cigarette on us, we just happen to scatter as quick as possible.
I'm a militant anti-tobacco smoker.
Yeah,
I've actually been known to spray osium on people's cigarettes on airplanes. Airplanes were still allowed to have cigarettes.
Well, that's when I was in Amsterdam. Everyone was rolling it with that. And the first time I was in a cafe and I just rolled up, just a joint with, I think I had some bubble or something, and I smoked it, and everybody gave me the evil eye. And the pure, why you smoke the pure?
Right? I think you're a crackhead back then.
The reason the Dutch don't smoke pure is because they're too cheap. Tobacco's cheaper, so they mix it with tobacco.
Yeah, and I'm like, the pure, and I'm like, why would you mix something that took like that?
Also, cannabis is a learned experience, and if the first time you smoke cannabis, it's mixed with tobacco, then that's one of the cues your body and brain is looking for. If you smoke pure, you have trouble realizing you're even high.
Yeah, that tobacco, I'll tell you. Ooh.
Harsh on the throat, harsh on the lungs.
Like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'll show you what I mean.
It's funny, because tobacco was a sacred plant to the American Indians. And, of course, they were not growing it mixed with chemicals and all this other crap like modern cigarettes with glycerin to keep it burning. But still, it was a sacred plant. They used it. They would take big doses of it and get psychedelic on it.
Well, also, because I'm really psyched you brought that up, because, tobacco has always been viewed as this really sacred, super powerful plant medicine in a lot of different healing traditions for like thousands of years, you know. And you know, one of the most, I was sitting in an ayahuasca ceremony once, and this shaman from Brazil kind of blew my mind so hard on this, what he said, and the way he talked about tobacco. He was saying how, you know, tobacco is such a powerful like amplifier spirit to like amplify your prayers and intentions and blessings, and which is one of the reasons why it's so commonly used in these ceremonial spaces. You know, and the shaman will be smoking it and kind of blowing it on somebody, or you know, it's used in a tobacco, like in the preparation that you blow in your nose.
Yeah,
like
but aren't they using commercial cigarettes? They're not using sacred tobacco.
No, well, no. I mean, in ceremony, typically, like they'll use like tobacco rustica, you know, kind of grown down South America or what have you. But my point is, you know, what was spoken through the words of the shaman was that, you know, tobacco is used so improperly by the Western world, because in all healing traditions, it's never inhaled into your lungs, because tobacco has the power to create or destroy, and whenever it's taken into lungs, you know, it's smoked in the way that's done in the Western world, and just thinking about your stresses and all the things in life and amplifying.
There was no tobacco. There was no tobacco you could inhale into your lungs until after the 1860s, when they invented bright tobacco in America. The
Shipibos in Peru,
curing it.
But the Shipibos in Peru have been using kind of tobacco rustica for, you know, thousands of years. Same thing with the, you know, certain indigenous tobacco.
You couldn't inhale that into your lungs.
No, but it's not meant to be, and it kills you if you do. And the way in Native American traditions, the way tobacco is used is taken in your mouth, not inhaled, and then blown out with the power of all your prayers and spirit, you know, intention, you know. And so it's used. So the way it was described by this shaman is that, you know, it has the power to create or destroy, and it's destroying so much more because of the way it's used, you know, and it's so far off the medicinal use of it, you know. And I'm not advocating for, you know, taking smoke in your mouth and blowing it out and not inhaling, you know, but you know, certain tobacco preparations like hape, which is so commonly used throughout
They
Brazil.
still do that with pipes and cigars.
Sure. But yeah, I just found it very interesting, because it's like, it's, you know, it's so common, used in so many different healing traditions around the world for so long, and it hasn't had the same effect on just wiping out the populations as here, and you know, they attribute it basically just to our disrespectful and improper use of it, you know.
What
changed tobacco was
principal active component of tobacco, right? Which is an alkaloid, which is, again, a completely different ball game. Nicotine is toxic, right? You know, so imagine, again, the cannabis plant doesn't have a non-toxic component, right? Tobacco has a toxic component. I think like a dose of somewhere between 50 to 80 milligrams can kill a adult human being. Imagine a dose of 50 to 80 milligrams of THC, if that killed a human being. Oh my God. So they're two different biologies, two different plants, two different chemistries. And unlike, you know, nicotine, or unlike tobacco, the cannabis essential oil is remarkably free of nitrogen containing compounds, where if you look at the essential oil of tobacco and nicotine itself, which is a pyrrolidine-based alkaloid, these things are not thermally stable, and they undergo Hofmann degradation when you heat them up in the presence of air. So they degrade into a variety of different just downstream products. So it's like they're two very, very different plants, two very, very different.
Oh yeah, and I was that all
tobacco itself. And tobacco itself, when you flue cure it, to produce bright tobacco, which is all modern cigarettes, it changes the pH. That allows it to be inhaled and absorbed through the lungs, which made it way more addictive.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting plant that obviously, you know, when looked at from the shamanic perspective, many shamans using tobacco as a ways to sort of almost, you know, uncover things and also leave breadcrumbs to get back from these journeys on certain psychedelics. that it's not surprising that somehow, we got a hold of it and turned it into this, inverted version of itself, right?
A lot of shamans also will take a mouthful of distilled spirits and spray it on their subject. And I don't use distilled spirits. I don't use tobacco.
No, nor do I. Never did.
Do you just spit on people then?
I try to as often as I can.
What do we got? 3.5 hours of hash church? Pretty slamming. You have anything you wanted to tell us about anyone? Anyone have anything they wanted to say that they didn't get to say yet? That they've been sitting on the whole time, patiently?
Well, I wanted to go back to the thing I was saying earlier about contamination. So if you do have, for whatever reason, like a contaminated batch of material, you can reclaim. So there's a lot of advances in membrane separation and chromatographic separation technologies that will enable you to basically remediate contaminated oil. And if you think about it, just like water filtration systems, a lot of these are basically membranes that have, again, certain wetting capacities, so it is a disposable. Again, Marcus, what happens? I was thinking about your question that you asked before, like if you do filter the stuff through like a silica, what do you do with the silica? Well, it's kind of like, well, what do you do with the cartridge in your filter that filters your water for your, kitchen or your refrigerator?
Or anything.
Yeah, or anything. So these things. So even if you did, like Indra's always talked about having, activated charcoal and molecular sieves. Well, there's a lot of different chromatographic supports that will basically bind up any trace amounts of residue. So if you took an ethanol solution of these things, run it through, hang up the stuff, and then just material tested by Alec before and after, and see if your chromatographic separation actually gets rid of the material. I mean, that's
scalable.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah. This is used in water remediation. I work with companies that, do this all the time in the essential oil and the food industry as well. And again, there's all kinds of different membranes and different types of separation technology.
I don't think we should be spreading this knowledge, because the truth of it is it will encourage people to use pesticides to produce big, giant, so-called healthy crops. And then they say, well, we can clean it up afterwards.
No, I for what it's worth, I actually really appreciate you bringing that up, because I didn't know if I wanted to say it, but I just on some romantic level, I kind of was hoping that pesticide removal wasn't going to be scalable or would ultimately fail, because I feel like the biggest demand for that service is going to be the big monocrop gnarly guys that are just trying to cut the just figure it out like that, and I feel like as long as there's tight pesticide regulations and you can't remove pesticides, it's almost going to work out better for the small guy, but
for the people who are deciding not to use them in the first place.
Exactly. That's totally what I mean.
Well, I'm just thinking, just from the point of view that someone's made an investment in some material, they did some testing, they had a good idea that this material was contaminant free. Now they've taken that material and they've processed it into a concentrate, like a rosin, and now it comes up hot. Well, shit, what did they do? Did they just flush that $50,000 down the toilet? Or do they try to remediate that material to make medicine out of it? The point I'm trying to make, Sam, I'm not trying to say that this is how it should be done, but the point is that there are ways of basically cleaning these things up so you can actually recoup the medicine that you
don't you think if people know that, it will encourage the thoughtless to mass produce with pesticides and clean it up later?
No, because cleaning it up basically marginalizes the product somewhat. Because now you're probably cleaning out other things as well. Again, I think Alec asked a really important question: is it scalable? So I think it's very, very important to be able to point out the fact that, you know, when you're removing trace amounts of material from, say, a large amount of oil or a large amount of extract, you could easily overload the capacity of any of these smaller columns. So it's just like, you know, running a lot of crap through your water filtration system for home. Yeah, eventually the capacity of that column is going to be overloaded and it's not going to function anymore, which is why you got to do a test before and after. And again, I'm not saying that you should use remediation as part of your production process, Sam, which I think is what you're trying to say. I'm saying that if you're in the situation where you already have material that you've already made an investment in, rather than throwing away, it can be remediated and it can be purified, and test results can show that this stuff now passes the pesticide test. You know,
it's a tough one. I see both points. I see the one point more than the other, but I see where Mark's coming from too. I see every time he says, "What are you gonna do? Throw that $50,000 away?" And that's where like Alec and Sam are cringing the most.
Yes, I would throw it away in a hot second.
Me too, and I have.
That's the problem. That's what Mark's addressing, is that they're not. And then what they're doing is that they're getting it into the market, whether it's quote unquote medicine or black market. They're just getting it to people because those people are turning a profit. They're not turning medicine. They're like, okay, fuck it. We just need to move this.
Yeah, they'll sell it in a market where they don't have to have testing requirements on the package, or, you know, it'll be black market. I mean, it'll lose some value in the market, right? Because they can't put a label on it and sell it for the market for which it was intended. But the point is that I don't know. And again, the ethics of it is that the material can be salvaged. It seems like able to have a way to reproducibly clean up contaminated oil that shows contamination at a certain level, when, again, some of the contamination could be there, not from a foliar application or anything that the cultivator did. It could be contamination from either the soil or just unintentional contamination from some other source.
And I think if we were in a much more regulated situation, and we the industry itself took all of the things that we need to do to be proactive in this middle ground right now, where there's no repercussions. But if it was organized and we had all of these lines of defense, if you will, from the genetics to the cultivating and extracting, if somebody or their material was found with contaminants and had pesticides, you don't even want to just throw it away. It's bad for the environment. So as a remediation process, maybe what happens is, material can't go into the market, and it has to be processed prior to even getting rid of it. So I think there might be potentially a it's kind of like how they clean hazardous waste, how our sewer systems work, and they clean hazardous waste before it gets re-released. I think that would be on a larger scale.
I don't think you need to worry so much, Tony, because if you think about the average trash dump, all of the America's food is getting dumped there. Yeah. And you don't think there's any pesticides?
Oh my God, yeah. That's true.
So the problem is not
Delusions of pollution
contaminating the environment. The problem is the people are using the goddamn things in the first place.
Well, on top of that, you also have, statisticians are coming out saying that even in legal states and where things will come online and regulated, they're still expecting a third of the market to still remain illegal. So as much as I'd love the utopian idealist that you're posing there, that if something is, negative, it should be destroyed, which I agree, because that's what happens in other environments. Nobody takes barley that's failed and goes along and sells it, on the side, on the cheap. Maybe some people do illegally, etc. But they're still not allowed to carry that into other markets, etc. But that's still going to continue until it's going to come from the individual consumer. They have to demand the testing. Right. That's where it all came from.
The black
we had
market
to demand it.
Continue. The black market will continue as long as
Forever.
the prices remain so high. As soon as the prices get below a certain level, there will be no black market because there's no money in the black market.
It's just interesting though when you consider how much like tonnage of herb is grown in California every year, and like how literally probably like 85% of it or something like that goes elsewhere. You know, it's amazing to think how, I mean, it seems like such a impossibility for a regulated model to actually be able to get it all to stay in state. And so it's not, it just seems like it's going to be
because it can't.
Till that
Because
happens.
it can't. It can't stay in state.
Right. And it's that overgrow the government idea, you know? I feel like it's just going to keep doing its thing.
Everyone wants Cali herb, like not just California. You know? How are you going to, this is the problem with these legal sort of platforms. If they don't allow for everything and they put rules, too many rules, then the black market just continues to do its thing. It's like, oh, well.
Especially when the prices are still based on prohibition and not on straight agricultural conditions.
Exactly.
I mean, look at my, all right, I have 2 dispensaries in Nevada, and the prices of Nevada are high, and there's no way that the illegal market is going to go away as the ungodly amount of taxation and overtaxation that we have seen in these regulated environments. That has to also go away because they're, again, as we have talked about in the past, they're looking through these prohibition induced eyeglasses that have produced this false high price of cannabis. And as we see in these legal states, it's considerably coming down, and it's only continuing to come down.
Hey, Etienne, what are the
tax
rates and what are the tax rates in Nevada? Because I've seen a couple posts on this week that I couldn't believe the taxes that were on a receipt, but I think the receipt may have been fake news.
No,
so like,
it's not.
What would an eighth, like, is an eighth going to cost somewhere between $40 to $50 and be taxed? How much? How much are you going to walk out of that transaction?
I have not done an actual transaction at the retail at the adult use yet. It's being done every day at my facilities, but I have not actually gone there because it's only in one facility in Las Vegas currently. Our incline one, we had to wait for the laws to change in incline, which are set to take path at the end of this month. And then on August 1st, we'll be able to do an adult sale. But the adult sale tax is unfortunately very high. I mean, it can be, as I know, is up to $60 to $80 per eighth.
Wow.
With that kind of price. Yeah. That is, it's obnoxious, but this is unfortunately, we're dealing with limited supply, limited suppliers. There's also already happening what happened up in Washington State is happening to some of the other suppliers, is that they didn't order enough stock for when they went legal, and now they're already running out of cannabis, and a lot of the distributors don't have either the licenses yet or the ability to transfer. So we're still dealing with, unfortunately, the realities of the supply chain isn't even fully up to snuff yet, and we've already been inundated from the adult use.
Under prohibition, people were basically growing under lights. That was the biggest method, and the production costs under lights has a certain basic minimum. It's probably like, I don't know, $500 a pound or $1,000 or whatever the price is. I'm not an underlight grower, so I don't know exactly, but when you grow that in a greenhouse, you cut the price by 3/4. When you grow it outdoors, you can cut the price by 90% again.
Mm. So, yeah, that's $10,000 pounds. That's just like over the top.
No, and this is what overregulation has done, but it's going to we have to go through these growing pains, unfortunately, to finally get to the reality that we're going to, because, again, we're dealing with knee-jerk reaction. It goes to the state. The state's going to regulate it. The state of Nevada.
Yeah. The state, I think Nevada's full of a bunch of wise guys, man. I just like.
Also, though, I think the price of herb is going to go up before it goes down. You know, because I think although there's such an abundance flood of weed everywhere, and people growing outdoor having such a hard time even getting it for like $7,000 to $8,000 a pound, right? It's. I think it's an artificial flow, or I think it's false. Well, my only point I was going to make is just like, although there's an abundance of herb on the market, I think a lot of the big manufacturers and producers who are sourcing so much trim, trying to find abundance to trim, they're having this reality check of like how actually there's a crisis of scarcity of clean material. And so I think for the clean material, the price is going to go up before it goes down.
And that's one of the reasons why it's also so high, is because it is tested, you know, and we have to deal with all these.
And prices in dispensaries are, like you say, going slightly higher, remaining constant or whatever. But wholesale prices in California, they're a fraction of what they were.
But I mean, that fluctuation will change with the regulations that happen here in California.
Oh yeah, and you know, because I think, you know, if you look at Colorado, the price of trim in so many ways, because it's so hard to find really good quality trim. You know, I mean, for really good trim, you know, $400 to $800 a pound, people have been known to pay. You know, and you know, when you consider what people are selling for California, how worthless, you know, or just people, yeah, just there's so much abundance of material. But again, you know, I think, you know, just working with a lot of really big manufacturers, people who are trying to,
who pays $48,000
a month or a week.
Who pays $4,800 a pound for trim? I've never heard of such a thing.
No, not 48. I said 4,200 a pound. Depending on the quality.
400. Even
and
that's quite high. Yes.
Yeah, and so I think, you know, whenever people are realizing the scarcity of clean medicine, I think
he's also comparing indoor market to a outdoor market. Outdoor, you'll see it from 50 to 200, and
sure, but
all indoor, basically what he's talking about.
Yeah, and you know, but just in general, I just think you know, as we go into this regulated space, I just think the value of clean herb is going to spike much more. You know, because I think it's so hard to find consistent, clean, unlimited source of material. And I think that's the biggest problem with supply chain stuff that most businesses have. Is you could have all the dreams you want, but if you know, once regulations kick in and you're relying on hundreds of thousands of pounds of trim a month, it's like, if you don't know any dude holding clean weed, you're like, you don't have anything. You know, you're dead in the water.
Okay, I got this from my guys in Las Vegas. $65 pre-tax. With tax, it's about $76.86 for an eighth.
Okay, that's from top shelf.
Is that top shelf?
Yes, that's top shelf. That's all. That's top shelf.
That's top shelf. So good.
What is that as a percent? Is that 15, 20%?
It's a sales tax by county plus a 10% excise tax for recreational customers. So they pay a specific tax, like, and 10% there. It will be 15% here in California.
Same in Colorado. I think it's the same system. I do believe.
Well, if cannabis is legal, the taxes don't bother me.
Yeah, I was going to say, just complaining about taxes sure seems less serious than complaining about how your house got.
Well, we used to always sit around and joke, like 20 years ago, the joke, you know, it'll never happen in our lifetimes. And then it would turn to the conversation, well, if they were to tax it, you know, I'm fine with it. Well, now it's taxed, and this is the reality. And this is it's a short-term reality as what it is, because there will be adjustments as things happen. But this is the reality if we got it. It's here it is. This is what you wanted.
Etienne, is to lower basic production costs. Then if they're taxing at 10 or 20%, but it's only costing $100 a kilo unmanicured dry, then who cares?
Right, and then the hit will have to be taken by the distributors as well. It'll be all across the chain. But again, this is the initial growing pains.
Listen, there'll still be someone, when Sam comes out and grows it for $100 a kilo, there'll still be someone that says, listen, we have to charge $3,000 a kilo because we have a very large overhead. And I mean, we need to keep our head above water here. I mean, it's hard to take the price of herb down because truly, like, first of all, there's never enough of it. Like Alec was saying, like, how many companies, if all you do is extractions or processing, if you don't have relationships with people who actually have material that is not latent with pests, diseases, pesticides, all these things, then you have nothing.
So I figured it out one time. 50 square miles, I think maybe even 40.
Nice.
Will produce all the cannabis that is consumed in America for a year.
Oh, so you weren't even taking into account Canada's cannabis. Thanks, Sam.
No, just Americans, whether they were smoking the straight herb or whether they were grinding it up and making extracts or whether they were making dry sipped or water hash. I was looking at the whole picture, and I figured the consumption was between 40 and 50 square miles per year.
Wow.
What year was that?
About 6 months ago, I figured it out.
Based on cannabis consumption when, though? Because it's growing, right?
Yeah, the present one. Okay, so fine. It's 100 square miles.
Just in case. It's 50 square miles, give or take.
It's a small speck of California agricultural property.
Well, you know what? It makes sense, Sam, because isn't like most of the more opium that's grown for the pharmaceutical industry grown on like a small island, like 90% of it or something?
Well, Tasmania grows, it's actually a GMO opium plant, which doesn't produce traditional morphine. It's got, I think, I forget what Mark probably knows what it produces, but then they convert that to morphine so that junkies can't use the flowers themselves.
Interesting. They just want to create like soccer mom junkies, not like, junkies.
Well, no, you have to buy pharmaceutical drugs. Then it's okay to be addicted.
That's what I mean, right? Like if you go get your shit from the pharmacy, you're like, all right, these are the junkies we want to create. It's crazy how they've changed the face of addiction, because here in Vancouver, I mean, 6,000 overdoses last year, not deaths, 6,000 overdoses last year in 365 days. 6,000 people overdosed on like fentanyl, and it's like unbelievable.
And it's unfortunately widespread all across the entire United States right now.
Yeah, fentanyl, like that it's that's so evil, that's a compound that's been able to be created and pharmaceuticalized because of how much more multiple, like exponentially more addictive and strong it is than morphine. It's like, that's why we're creating this alternative healing world, right?
Yeah, truly.
They have newer analogs which are 10 to 100 times more potent than pure fentanyl.
I trust those even less. That's carfentanil. Brutal shit. It's unbelievable. It's serious though. I mean, when you have that many people passing away, and not just like and for me, I never see them as undesirables, but society does. They see people who are junkies living under bridges. It's easy for them to say goodbye to those people. Oh, they are drug addicts. But now with oxycodone and fentanyl, drug addicts are everyday people. They're not living under bridges anymore. They're living in homes, and they're just like teenage girls and boys, and they're
our brothers, our sisters, our uncles, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters.
They always were. But they were harder.
Live in those homes long. They need to sell them so they can buy some more fentanyl.
Well, it's crazy. You hear about the addiction quality of fentanyl and how often they have to hit that every day, like 4 or 5, 6 times a day, or they can go through withdrawal 4 or 5 or 6 times a day. Can you imagine?
The worst thing about fentanyl is maybe too that if you take the exact same measured dose time after time after time, one time it just kills you. It becomes accumulative or something. There's something different about it. Heroin doesn't do that. If you had the exact same measured dose, it doesn't kill you all of a sudden. In fact, heroin kind of preserves people. Look at Keith Richards.
Somebody in the chat was saying they lost a friend on Friday from an overdose.
Damn. Keith Richards looks haggard, by the way.
He does. He
does look haggard, but he's alive, I guess is what I'm saying.
That was the third best thing you said today, Alec. I don't know why. There's just been a few key things that have made me laugh. Keith Richards looks haggard. That was great. Clearly, I'm baked. Anyone else enjoying their day?
Big time.
Although you may have noticed I was a little bit late. That's because I was asleep until my wife came and woke me up.
I know. It was funny because people were like, "Is Sam not coming into church?" I'm like, "No, what do you mean? Of course Sam's coming into church." And then like a half an hour went by. I was like, "I think Sam's coming into church." And then it was like 45 minutes. So yes, I will admit I sent your wife a message. "Hey, what's going on? We're looking forward to Sam on church."
Well, she wasn't home either, which was part of the reason why I was sleeping. She was off at the beach having fun with our granddaughter and having a good time at the beach. And she came back. Hash Church had been on for an hour, and I was asleep.
That's awesome. Well, we're glad you made it. Honestly, I'm thankful. It was there was definitely like lots of stuff that was being said in the hour that I felt was pertinent to your being here. So I'm glad you ended up making it in for certain. And in the meantime, I guess I should really thank everyone for coming in. What a great panel today. Alec, thank you as well. I know it's hard for you sometimes to get up at 9 a.m. on the Sunday morning. For everyone, it's maybe only one of the only days you get to have to yourself, but I do appreciate you coming in and representing.
Deep respect. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, dude, all that you do. We certainly don't think of you as the Grinch here at Hash Church.
Thank you.
That's awesome. And of course, thank you to Etienne for always being first in the room and always staying right to the end. As always, brother, sorry to hear about your old man, but I know you're doing well, and I'm glad you got your computer fixed and you're back on Hash Church with us here.
Woohoo! Is that still happening next week that you were talking about?
I'll let you know in a private message.
Right on, right on.
Awesome.
After next, I won't be around. Next week I will be around, but the weekend after I'm taking that trip, and unfortunately, when I do come, I'm going to the island just for like 4 hours, and it's during Hash Church.
Hey, you're on the island. That's a good 4 hours, dude. Enjoy it. We'll be thinking of you. And as always,
I chimed in from Aruba. Come on now.
You did, but only 4 hours. Come on, that would be really serious commitment to be chiming in for like any amount of time if you were only there for 4 hours. Thank you, Dr. Mark, for coming in and always setting us straight on all things scientific, chemistry based. And Skunkman Sam, we're glad that you woke up and made it in here for us. I was happy to have both Wade in from the House of Harlequin and Forrest in from the Caladrius Network. You can check those guys out by just simply Googling their names and their networks, House of Harlequin and Caladrius Network. And as always, thanks, Tony, for making it in as well. I know he had a long night yesterday at Chalice collecting trophies with Gold Drop and Blue River. So props to those guys.
Yeah, congratulations. They swept it.
Yeah, totally. Good job, guys. And thanks to Indra for coming out and Peter from Soil Balance Pro. Anyone else I'm forgetting? I hope not, but thank you, everyone in the audience. We had a good 700 people watching, pretty solid today. We're down to 500 now, but thank you, man. Holy shit, 4 hours committed to Hash Church. One of the best for the books. I thought it was spectacular, and I look forward to next week when we'll do it all again. Thanks for coming, everybody. Peace out.
Peace.